Thank you, and welcome and good evening to tonight's Regeneration, Culture and Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As we start, the first item, have we got any apologies for absence? Okay, I will go left to right, so I'll go Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm covering for Councillor Etheridge.
Excellent. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I'm covering for Councillor Nesterov.
And finally, Councillor Bain.
I'm covering for Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. Everyone, Councillor Brake. No, yep.
Yes, and finally, I'm covering for Councillor Dunn.
Thank you, Councillor Brake. Okay, first item of business. Can I sign the record for the meeting held on the 12th of May 2026 as correct? Thank you. Urgent matters, there are none. Declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests and other significant interests. Are there any? I will add my own. Item 6 is bus services in Medway. That's my member's item, but I work for London Buses. London Buses have Arriva as a supplier and have contracts with them, but I'm not in any way involved in those contracts. And so therefore, I do not see that there's any reason I can not partake in that matter. Okay, thank you. Okay, the first item of business tonight is the attendance of the portfolio holder for business management. So we'll welcome Councillor Van Dijk to the committee. Would you like to make a brief introduction?
Thank you. Well, as the papers state, this annual report provides an account of my role as portfolio holder for business management, detailing the ambitions for the areas of responsibility I have and will undertake political challenge and leadership. Committee is asked to note the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions on the paper.
Thank you. First, Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Councillor Van Dijk. Section 3.3 describes a major transition, the termination of the Medway North's facilities management arrangement, a full disaggregation of services and the TUPE transfer of staff. Given the scale of the operation and statutory risk, I'm seeking clarity on several points. First, on the decision to end the joint venture, what specific performance or compliance issues led to the termination notice in April 2025, and has a lesson learned review been completed? Secondly, on the statutory compliance during the 12-month rundown, were there any fire, water, gas, electrical or asbestos inspections overdue during the transition? And what assurance do we have that the compliance was independently monitored? Third, on the new hybrid model, what options appraisal was undertaken? How many bids were received, and what is the projected cost difference compared with the joint venture? And fourth, on readiness for the 1st of April 26, were any risks rated red at handover, and was an independent readiness assessment carried out before the Cabinet approval? And finally, on TUPE, how many staff and how many staff were transferred, and how many declined? And what was the total cost of the TUPE process, including the legal and pension implications? Chair, these are core governance questions, and we do need assurance that compliance was maintained, the risks were controlled, and the new model is financially sustainable. Thank you.
Councillor Kemp, before I go to Councillor Van Dijk, I note that Ruth DeLu, as the senior officer whose area this comes into, is not here at the moment. I'm not sure where she's going to be, so I'm just wondering. Sorry, Sonny.
So there's a bit of an overlap there. So Ruth had overall charge, if you like, of the Medway North contract in the run-up, Councillor Kemp, that you were talking about, but the handover was me in terms of FM, and that's why Pete is here.
It's his own in terms of those
So we have enough, I think. And if there's anything we can't answer that would need Ruth from the overall contract perspective, we can always take that back.
Councillor, did you want to just a brief introduction before potentially officers go in more detail?
Yeah, sorry. Well, just to state the position, Norse issued termination on April 25 with 12 months notice to April 2026, disaggregating the FM services from the joint venture contract with Norse. So I don't know if that answers part of the questions you asked in terms of how this came about. You've asked about statutory compliance with fire safety and electrical work, and I wonder if I can refer that to one of the officers, please. Sonny?
Happy to jump in, Chair. Is that okay? Yep. So just on the statutory compliance element, and also I think your original question around also the hybrid option, what did we look at appraisals and costs and so on and so forth? Just looking at the budget is probably the most straightforward question to answer. We are working within a £6 million budget envelope, and the original proposed cost for Medway North services for this year was going to be 6.7. So that's fairly straightforward in terms of answering that question. That includes all the costs for the staff. I don't have the exact answer around in terms of legal, so I don't know if Norse incurred any legal charges. I'm not aware that they charged us with any, and obviously we used our own internal legal resources. So I don't think there was much there, but if you really want the detail, I can try and find out more. That's the budget side. On the statutory compliance in the last year is that we were doing the run-up, obviously it being in Medway North's hands for, I think, nigh on 13 years, so there was a lot of work there. One of the reasons, one of the things that we looked at was there were some gaps around who was doing what around some of the compliance elements, and that's natural, that happens. It was quite a quick handover 13 years ago, and between my very small contract management team and Medway North, we did establish that there wasn't a full total FM solution that was being provided. So it was a little bit, there were gaps in it, and we were, as a council officers, were trying to fill those gaps. That's why we ended up with a hybrid option, because there were things like Legionella's, some elements around some of the fire compliance that weren't always clear around who was doing it, and there were some gaps. Now, we have identified those gaps. Pete, to my right, I don't need to bring him in at this stage unless further details needed. Himself and Dan Stone, who couldn't make it tonight, are looking at cloud-based compliance data, so that, again, it sends automatic flags. So we have gone through all of the buildings. No, they're not all compliant, but we're also having a conversation at the moment internally in terms of corporate health and safety around the plan that we have in place and working through that to ensure that everything is up to date. So there were some gaps in terms of there wasn't a total FM solution. We are now taking full responsibility for that within this hybrid option of some of the in-house staff, as well as the procurement that we went through. In terms of the appraisals on hybrid, yes, we looked at things like a total FM. So we looked at, for example, if you like, a Medway North 2.0, so where those gaps were filled and where we would go out totally in terms of to the market. And we also looked at whether or not we could take all of those services in-house. Not much of a surprise there that the hybrid was the best compromise in regard to cost and also risk to both the council and then how much we want to outsource that risk. So that process we did go through that. Similarly, just I think one of the other things that you asked around the staff transfer and the cost of the transfer. So that was all included within the £6 million budget envelope that we have for this year. I think I've answered most of those questions, but apologies, Councillor Kemp, have I missed anything?
No, the only one which what hasn't been, I don't think, satisfactorily answered was what specific performance or compliance issues actually led to the termination of the contract. Why? What was wrong with that needed it to be changed?
So the key point, just to reiterate, is that we did not have a total FM solution, and then to make it a total FM in order to fill those gaps and put them all on Medway North would have made the contract very difficult to manage in terms of just piling more and more work. So we had a conversation with Medway North around how we can create a total FM, what the budget would be, etc. And I think between us, so remembering that there's still a lot of services that Medway North in terms of the joint venture and the partnership is still conducting for the council. This was a relatively small part of it. The liability is a landlord as well, because obviously we have the statutory liabilities. If anything goes wrong, we're the ones that are responsible. Between Medway North and ourselves, it felt like the best solution to bring that liability back into the council and have a total FM solution. So regardless, we needed a total FM solution. That wasn't what we had at the time. This was the best solution going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for those answers, Sonny. That's really transparent. Councillor Van Dijk, thank you very much for your report. It was an interesting read. You'll be glad to know I've only got 3 questions for you tonight. Just a quick follow-up on the TUPE question. Can we just be assured that any outstanding questions around TUPE are now resolved? And is there any likelihood of any financial risk to the council going forward? Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, just for the record, no. So it's all done.
I saw the head shaking. That's
yes,
fine. Yeah.
So no, there are no
fine.
outstanding issues in terms of the 2P.
Yeah, that's excellent. Okay. And that's same for pension as well. And I think one of the questions
Correct.
I asked at the call-in was around salary, equalisation. That's an ongoing project, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, that's a yes. Pretty straightforward. But Pete, did you want to come in with some more detail on the actual structure?
Certainly. Thank you for the question. So as part of the TUPE transfer, what we're looking at is the staff obviously TUPE'd over on their Medway North terms and conditions. There would then be a run-up to then issuing or offering, I should say, a Medway council contract. And we're looking at that to be around about the end of September, beginning in October, if not sooner, if we can get it done by then.
Okay. And I'm sure all the financial implications of that are being factored into the first year of contract, yeah?
Yes. So as we did the budget monitoring for the new term of the contract, we looked at, as part of the mobilisation, where would them staff come in and at what pay point would that be, and then factored it into the budget. So it's all been budgeted for this year.
And Chair, I was just interested in officers very openly saying there were gaps in some of the work being done. So I imagine you're going through a period of looking at what was done by Medway North, what's been done in the FM, because all the contracts need to be nice and firm. Do we expect any significant costs in putting those gaps right? So if there's any actual capital work that needs to be done, any one-off jobs to bring, for example, fire sprinklers up to compliance, for example?
So on that, there'll be a mixture of building maintenance and repair fund. So some of those things might fall into it's that time of the year, it's that time of it's that year for that building to have its sprinklers or whatever it might be. So there's an element of overlap with that. In terms of, you're right, but we're barely 3 months in.
Yeah.
We're barely 3 months in. Yes, things have come out of the woodwork, and that's the point. We didn't have a total FM solution. We are now finding out what was included in that. Okay. We've even had odd things where Jill and I's division, where things have been paid for originally that were green spaces. So I've had to sit down and say, oh, actually, well, we'll take some of our budget that originally was from that, and then we give it over. So that harmonisation and understanding of what services we're really dealing with and what we need is a learning process. So at the moment, we're okay, we're within budget, we know what we're doing and everything's fine. Great. But throughout the year, I think next year's report, we can give you more detail on what this year has looked like. We've always talked about it as a year of challenge. Yeah, because it's been done one way for 13 years. This is a bit of a discovery year.
Yeah, I think this is an important point, Sonny, that you make. You're bound to have a period of settling in. I don't think on this side we're always entirely happy with the reasons why Medway North were, but that's, we can argue about that until the cows come home. One more question on the FM side is a couple of the contractors didn't quite make it to the starting gate. And we then decided to take some of that work in-house. Any concerns at this very early stage about the contractors who are still at the starting gate and maybe at the beaches for the first time? I think, again, so it's a bit of a weak answer, I'm afraid. We're 3 months in. I know Pete and the team have been working really hard to make sure the contractors are on there. And yes, there have been some bumps on the road. We have been talking to other services
and trying to get it right. But nothing we haven't been able to
Nothing
mitigate.
you're worried about this?
Correct. No, not at
Okay,
this
that's
stage.
all I wanted to know. Great.
Thank you.
Okay, so just going on to the sale of assets, I think we do need to congratulate officers for the sales that have been achieved. It's a difficult market, and some of the property we were selling was none too good, maybe. My question, Councillor Van Dijk, was really around, of the 19.5 million that's identified in your report, what is the exact value that's actually been completed and we've actually banked the cash? And the other point is that this council and this administration has capitalising more and more of its revenue spend. And I'm just wondering, of the 19.5 million that could have been used for debt redemption and therefore lower interest rates, how much have we actually used of those capital receipts to fund revenue items, because effectively the administration's run out of money? Thank you.
Well, first of all, to say we've already generated that 19.5 million, and we're not stopping at 20 million. We are still seeking to generate further funds. I wonder if Sonny, you can help with that, please.
Yeah, there we are. On the second question, so not to put that aside, and we can take that away. In terms of the portfolio holder, obviously that's more of a question for finance, but I'm more than happy to ask how, if there is a way. So I suspect, Councillor Lawrence, what normally happens is it's just dumped in the middle of the capital. But I'm happy to take it away for finance colleagues to tell us around any costs of borrowing and regular, turning it into revenue.
Yeah, so can I just be very, very clear on the first question? The 19.5 million has been fully received in the bank, contracts closed.
And I've got confirmation of that the capital receipts are received.
Perfect.
They're in the bank.
I think it's very important about the second part of my question, because the SIPFA review, which the administration has based its entire financial strategy on, was about using assets to pay off debt to reduce the interest burden. And if the administration is using those asset sales to finance other revenue, like EFS and the 7 million that you're chucking at LGR, then that means the interest debt saving won't have been made, and it means there'll be a reduction in services going forward. My third and final question is just on the sale of the Debenham site, or the non-sale of the Debenham site. I mean, I think the disappointing thing about that was that look, the previous administration took that site into ownership in 2022. But I wonder how long we've been waiting for the NHS to make its mind up, and have lost the opportunity to let that building to someone else. And as a consequence, we've lost rental income, and we've also incurred business rate costs and the cost of maintaining the building, security, and the fact, another closed shop on Chatham High Street isn't exactly a draw for punters to come and spend money in the high street. So I'm just wondering, did we enter into any agreement with the NHS whilst they were making up their minds to protect our position as a council for owning that asset? Thank you.
Well, as I understand it, there was no agreement. There were lots of discussions with the proposed partners, but that didn't go ahead. But now the plan is to have a mixed-use scheme with commercial and residential going forwards. So that's what's happening going forwards. In terms of the historical part of this, perhaps more detail could be given by officers.
So you're right to ask the question, and I think it's come up before. Officers, so this is about officers' recommendations. So we were trying to get commitment from the NHS. So the months that we were negotiating with the NHS, we ended up giving them deadlines saying we can't wait forever. So we were trying to achieve exactly what you say would have protected the council's interests. I think because the opportunity was so huge, not just from a strategic perspective, but the NHS, once you get them over the line, is a blue chip tenant. We're talking a 30, 35-year lease. We had, you might recall, Councillor Lawrence, we had put it out to the market previously. We'd not had anything viable come back. We had, for example, I won't state the company name, we'd had a discount furniture company apply, but they were looking at a 5-year lease. we weren't clear in terms of whether or not they would be able to, with break clauses and so on and so forth. So the amount of money, effort, and then what we would have potentially not got back, there were no other alternatives. So what I want to assure you of is that we did not turn away an amazing opportunity. The NHS was a bit like the Healthy Living Centre, except the Healthy Living Centre ended well, and it ended with good news. But it was always about the Healthy Living Centre. Debenhams was always about the NHS option, but now we are looking at, before Christmas, we'll have an update report on looking at this mixed use, different approach moving forward.
Thank you. Okay, so I accept the response. I think there are just a couple of things in my mind is that we don't want to turn Chatham Town Centre into a giant health centre because, once again, that has its use and there are, it's a good central location, but I just wonder if that's what we want for Chatham High Street. And I'm just wondering how long, given the current challenges in development, for example, and there's an item here where the planning team want to charge developers ever more money for doing things. How long do we think Debenhams will remain empty before a viable scheme comes forward?
So happy to answer that. It is speculative at the moment. We are going through details on what could be viable and what could be delivered. If I were to be optimistic, I would be looking at 28, 29 for something to come through, but it's subject to a lot of detail, further agreement, looking at the finances, who can develop it and so on and so forth. But that is purely speculative. But you are right, it could be longer because we don't know what's going on in terms of the geopolitical situation, national and international finances. I will say, as you mentioned previously, in terms of the previous administration and the Future High Street Fund, officers and members at the time worked together because we knew that it was owned by an offshore company. And if we didn't buy it, we'd have zero control and it would just be hoarded and it could sit there for 10, 15 years until a pension company decided it was time to do something with it. So it's not the solution, but we are at least in a position where we can try and do something with that rather than knocking on the door of an overseas owner who has less interest in the high street itself. So that is the small silver lining in the cloud, but yes, it's absolutely a challenge and there's no guarantee at this stage. We hope to have more information in the run-up before Christmas. All right?
Thank you. Any other member? I've got Councillor Williams, then Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Van Dyke, for your report. I'm just going to touch on Rochester Pier. It's a great asset for Medway, and it's been derelict for a few years. I see they've done in 3.53, they've done a comprehensive condition report on the upper section. I just wondered if there's been any progress at all on costings or tenders for the work at all.
So I believe this is part of the river strategy. Sorry, excuse me, my notes. And that isn't within my portfolio, as I understand it.
I was just on about the cost. Is there any costings been done for the job at all? Just to see if there's any. $3.53.
Yes. There you go.
Thank you, just for the record so they can record it, that's all. So what I'll do is, so that's within my team under Dan Stone and Adam Taylor. I will get back to you on the detail of what has come back. Now, what I do know is that we don't have the budget to deliver all of that, and we're looking at it in a piece-by-piece element. So I'm happy to come back with a little bit more detail. And as Councillor Van Dyke referred to, the emerging river strategy, that will be one of the priorities around how do we get funding in to do it. So what I can confirm is we don't have the many hundreds of thousands, no doubt, to bring it fully up to where we want it to be, but I'll get some more detail on whether or not we've got the costings or if there's a programme for them.
Yeah, thanks for that. Come on. Yeah, it's a very important asset for Medway, and I think the sooner we get it back into use, it'll be good. Thanks for that, and I look forward to getting that information. Thank you.
You'll be glad to know Councillor Curry is due at the next committee, so we can have a bit more of an in-depth discussion then. Next on to Councillor Cook, and then it will be Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for the report. Really interesting and lots of different things in there. I was particularly struck, as well as the things we've spoken about, around the registration and bereavement sections and the numbers there and the reality of the impact on everybody in Medway who uses those services either for fantastic times in their lives or terrible times in their lives. I'm just curious in terms of the impact of those numbers being ever rising and the impact that has on staff in terms of this isn't kind of work that we can just keep doing more and more because it must take an amount of time to actually give that human response to people when they come at these points in their lives. Are we confident that people have got the time to do those jobs, not only just to get the activity done, but to actually do them with the human approach that is required? Are we certain that we're not kind of losing quality with the numbers going up in such an important area? Thank you.
Thank you. As I understand it, sorry, just bear with me a moment, that there is the bereavement and registration services are operating to the maximum, and they're monitoring and tweaking procedures to make efficiency savings at the moment. They've just made a savings of 35% on their energy costs, which will be able to make it possible to shift resources into the service delivery.
Maybe we suggest frontline services provide a bit of response on that topic, because unfortunately we haven't got a representative here tonight. Then, thank you, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, actually, it was more of a comment than a question, Chair. But you know, I would welcome the portfolio, all the officers' observations if they've anything to say about it. But I wanted to react positively to the changes at the Pentagon Centre. The smashing new health facility is coming on stream. Sainsbury's is now open till 8 o'clock every day, apart from Sunday, obviously. It's good news for commuters. And I understand from a presentation I attended earlier this week that Mountbatten House will very soon be renovated and refurbished. So, you know, good news story, and would welcome any observations the portfolio holder or the assistant director wishes to make.
Sonny.
So thank you for that. And this is kind of complementing Zoe's portfolio rather than direct, so I'm happy to respond from that. Yes, that's, you know, regeneration is a marathon, not a sprint. So there's many people around the table, even myself, have been here for 14 years, but there'd already been a 10-year marathon before I turned up. So all of these elements and the very simple formula of, you know, we had an amazing, obviously, community before the 80s, before the docks, unfortunately, closed. We had huge high streets that were full and busy and vibrant, but unfortunately it was a bit of a cliff edge. And then obviously a lot of that space, in terms of office space, retail, became redundant and was excessive. So it's a very simple formula. So under Councillor Van Dijk's portfolio, MDC, we've been looking at, obviously Mountbatten House was converting an unused office into flats. Chatham Waterfront Development Site, bringing that footfall to the town centres is a very simple formula. And then replacing that retail where we can with housing, and then also they're not thinking about the nationals coming there, but more of the local businesses and that local offer. And it's a good point you make, I think, about Sainsbury's opening hours again for the commuters, because we are getting more, if you like, residents directly on in the area of Chatham Town Centre. So all of that is absolutely a part of the wider regeneration, and obviously the briefing you attended was around the Brook Theatre and that element as well, around that bringing up the town centre and that sense of arrival and a gateway to the city and the place of Medway. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gilmore.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just picking up a small point that Councillor Cook mentioned a couple of moments ago. On the registrations data, it's really fascinating information to find out about births, deaths and how many are being processed every year, particularly since COVID. But what I was interested to see, and it wasn't there, was comparisons with other authorities. And I would find that very useful because I know from the planning committee, we often get comparisons with other boroughs, particularly in Kent, how the planning department is performing. And I find that fascinating, but I'd find something like this fascinating as well, just to see how Medway is dealing with registrations compared to neighbouring boroughs. So it's just back to you, Chair, whether you'd like to take that forward, if you can. Thank you.
Thank you for the kind offer. Excellent. Okay, are there any other members who wanted to speak here? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Councillor Van Dijk, and thank you for attending tonight. And we'll probably see you roughly this time next year. Thank you. He says that, of course, local government reorganisation. Recommendation. So I'm going to pass now to the Vice Chair for recommendation.
Thank you. So I've got the couple of details of things that be followed up, particularly details on the peer, the capacity of recruitment services, and perhaps a consideration about whether comparison is appropriate outside of the meeting. But other than that, the committee's asked to note the report.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Thank you for your time tonight, Councillor Van Dijk. Okay, we're going on to the next agenda item, which is on a member's item from myself on bus services in Medway. So I'd like to welcome Norman Kemp from New Venture and Michael Bennett from Arriva to the committee. We've got 2 seats just there, and I think you'll have name badges by our esteemed clerk, Nicola, and we've got a few officers as well. So just as you take your seats, I just wanted to introduce the report. So in terms of this objective, what we want to have a discussion around is a number of issues. Firstly, around understanding what the current role of bus services in Medway are and what the potential there is for growth. This, of course, includes opportunity for supporting new housing, social and economic regeneration, public health and air quality improvements. We wanted to understand the challenges and opportunities to address the issue of low market growth in Medway and how services could be supported to stimulate economic growth and social cohesion. We wanted to also discuss the key needs and challenges for Medway bus users. We wanted to note the progress of the bus service improvement plan and how it's going in terms of achieving its aims. And we also wanted to listen particularly to the challenges that bus operators have and about how, as a council, we can help to support those in the challenges. So in that, thank you very much for attending tonight. So I'm not sure whether you wanted, obviously, we've probably got a few questions, but I'm not sure whether there's any just general thoughts that you wanted to just speak to first before we go to members to have a discussion on these matters.
Hello, I'm Michael Jennings. I'm the Commercial Director for Arriva Southern Counties. We operate the majority of buses in Medway. We carry about 8 million passenger journeys with our network, predominantly operating it out of our Gillingham depot. In terms of the picture for the bus business, the bus network, it's particularly challenging nationally. The world is changing, or has changed, particularly post-COVID. People's habits in terms of retail have changed, people's work habits have changed, the traditional 9 to 5 working in the town centre has changed, and that has reflected itself in reduced patronage. We've had challenges in terms of increasing costs. We had a period where inflation was particularly strong with wages during COVID. We've come into a challenging fuel market currently. We've got NI increases that we've had to absorb, and then there's additional things from government in terms of adding infrastructure to vehicles, such as screens and audiovisual equipment. I think the positives for us are that the market is still quite strong in Medway. Medway has recovered post-COVID better than the national average. It's recovered better than London. It's recovered better than Kent. our patronage in Medway is about 85% of what it was pre-COVID. I think in terms of big challenges, on top of the sort of the town centres and changing travel patterns, the other one's traffic congestion. So our buses today are 5% slower than they were pre-COVID. And that means to stand still, having to put 5% more resources in, or we're running the same resources which deliver less frequency, slower journeys and make the network less attractive. The other big challenge we've had coming out of COVID is investment. COVID killed many industries. It really hit them hard, and we were no exception. We had support from government, we had support from Medway Council, but the challenge was big, and it effectively sucked up our ability to invest for some time. I think we're coming out of that now. So we've invested in 19 new vehicles in the last 2 years. That's 22% of our fleet. Our average age of the fleet in Medway now is 10 years old, and we're continuing to charge forward to get the oldest vehicles out the fleet and continue that investment going forward.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think Michael has summed up the position for the whole of the industry very well. My company, of which I'm the owner, operates a small number of buses, about 30, about half of which operate in Medway. And virtually our entire Medway operation is under contract to Medway Council. We therefore have a very close working relationship with the public transport team and other officers in Medway. And that means that we're able to respond as best we can to any issues that the council or councillors may bring to us. And we've been working particularly closely with the bus service improvement plan, which has certainly revolutionised the finances of the council and the ability for the council to be able to underwrite and work with the industry on various projects. One that I'm particularly proud of, although it's at early stages, is the new 167 service, which links Walderslade, Lordswood, over towards Hempstead Valley. In other words, it's an orbital service, and I know that's one of the things in the report that has been picked up by consultants, that Medway's services are somewhat limited to the main roads, to which my response is that actually there are very few roads in Medway which are capable of sustaining a bus service. And one of the constraints we have is the topography and the geography of Medway. This is a very difficult place to run a bus service in, and that may be reflected in the lower levels of usage that we all as bus operators see. In terms of going forward, particularly the fact that the government funding through what's now called Bus Grant is apparently secure for 3 years going forward, gives us a great opportunity to explore with the council or with our own resources backed by the council for new ideas, new ways of working. However, at the end of the day, the bus industry is not a rich industry. While I would have a personal wish to innovate, for instance, with more modern vehicles, electric vehicles, hydrogen vehicles, the costs of doing that, particularly in a small business, are very, very hard to come to terms with when I have to make sure that my business is profitable to retain 50 or so jobs in the local area. I always welcome coming to meetings like this because I learn what individual councillors see as the problems. I may be aware, I may not be aware. So I'm looking forward to hearing any other comments that come around the table.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a very interesting discussion to begin with. I think actually one of the interesting things, I think, particularly I know, Michael, in your evidence in terms of speeds are 5% slower in Medway. And actually, as part of the session, I engaged with a Facebook group, the Medway Bus Passengers User Group, and it was interesting to see actually how many comments were about slow speeds and about actually how speeds, really can impact people's decisions and whether that's people essentially choosing to use the bus over not making the journey or use an alternative mode. I just wonder, actually, in terms of Medway's team, the bus service improvement programme has a lot of money for capital funding, doesn't it, to support this? I just wanted to understand what types of projects and what types of particularly data and innovation you might be using to support to actually really making sure that we're getting journeys as reliable as possible.
Good evening, everyone. As part of the bus service improvement plan, we undertook survey work with consultants, project centre, to create underneath that a local bus improvement plan. Literally, they've gone through route by route, looking at timings of delays and timings at bus stops, to also get like a wish list of schemes and improvements we can do. In the first year, we are focusing on the 132 route, which goes from Chatham to Hempstead Valley. There's a number of schemes within that, including working with our traffic signal colleagues to upgrade and improve signals for the benefit of all traffic. Plus, the Mears Court Road scheme is taking place this summer to give more capacity to that key bottleneck junction in Raynham. We'll be speaking later on regarding some changes to the Hothway roundabout. It's getting small, quick wins along the corridor. In an ideal world, you'd want segregated bus lanes, but they're getting into big money territory. So we can try and get some small, quick wins which benefit all traffic conditions. That's what we're aiming for in the first few years.
Thanks for that. I was just going to say, it's on just on this area in terms of journeys. Has any members got any examples that they wanted to illustrate in terms of issues that they picked up from residents? I see Councillor Kemp and Councillor Williams, Councillor Bowen and Councillor Hamilton. Councillor, was that you, Councillor Kemp? I think you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a question to Mr. Jennings. About 11 years ago, when I was the Mayor of Medway, I launched some eco buses at the just around the corner here, and they was in operation for about 4 or 5 weeks, and then all of a sudden they disappeared up to Sheffield or something. Is that sort of could you possibly give an explanation? Because a friend of mine who used to sit in your desk, Matthew Arnold, he couldn't come up with an answer either. But the second point I was going to say, he did tell me that when I was complaining to him about the withdrawal of a route in Raynham, he told me that they only had about 1.2 passengers per week on that route, and he said it's cheaper to provide every member with a taxi rather than run a bus company. But but if you could explain about the eco buses and whether or not we're going to get continue to get eco buses or electric buses, hydrogen buses, whatever, would be, I'll be interested. Thank you.
So we move vehicles around quite a lot. I think those particular ones, we won a contract somewhere quite short notice, and they were the only suitable vehicles in our fleet that matched that requirement. Being honest, some of the vehicles that we've brought in here recently were due to be going somewhere else, and we pinched them from elsewhere. So it swings and roundabouts, but I think the key for us, I mean, we've invested about £5.5 million in the last 2 years in new vehicles. We've invested a lot in refurbishments. We've got a refurbishment centre at our Gillingham depot, and they can take a 5-year-old vehicle and make it look brand new. They're fantastic. We've got a retrim shop, so they can refurbish the interior of the vehicle and make it look brand new. In terms of future vehicle investments, the last vehicles we bought were Euro 6 diesel, so they're the most modern diesel vehicles you can get. I think electric will come eventually. Our challenge at the moment is the cost. We can spend £250,000 to £300,000 on a diesel vehicle, or £400,000 to £500,000 on an electric vehicle. And with an electric vehicle comes the additional challenges of needing the infrastructure at the depot, which is many more millions, and then the challenges of needing to reschedule them so they can charge within the range and things. Our depot in Gillingham is quite an elderly depot. It's a difficult one to electrify in its current format. It's not impossible, but it makes it a lot harder because we've got to work around the historic infrastructure of the building.
as a rough percentage, how many buses operating in the Medway area are eco-friendly? Or
I've got that written
I
down
know modern
somewhere.
diesel engines are more eco-friendly than the ones 10, 15 years ago, but
So 38% of our fleet from our Gillingham depots Euro 6, 60% is Euro 5, and then 2% is Euro 4. And we're working on getting those Euro 4 vehicles out of the fleet this year.
Yeah, they're the ones which are filthy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's 38%.
38% Euro 6, 60% Euro 5.
Okay. And presumably the EU5s will be phased out in the fullness of time?
Yes, so the youngest of those is 11 years old now. So we typically work for a lifetime of about 15 years. So yeah. So they've probably got another 4 years within the fleet, but not necessarily in Medway. We might cascade them elsewhere if we can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I was just going to say on that point, I mean, obviously, different areas. I mean, just look at the BSIP. At that time, it was about 20% was Euro 6. Now you're saying it's near 40%. I see, obviously, in March, you Riva made an announcement of a big investment in regional fleets. I think, you know, the example that Councillor Kemp saw of previously, big announcement, new buses for Medway, and then suddenly they're taken away. Do we have any assurances that Medway will be getting its fair share of this massive investment across the Riva Group?
So there's no plans to bring new vehicles into Medway this year because of the 19 we've brought in the last 2 years. But the next year's allocation of fleet hasn't been allocated yet. So there's an opportunity to bring some in next year.
And would that be targeted particularly to get up our Euro 6 standards?
So all new vehicles are either Euro 6 or zero emission. But yeah.
Yeah, excellent. And good news on the retrims. I noticed the 190 I was on the other day has a lovely new interior, so that was good to see. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you for coming tonight. Just I'm a councillor for a rural area, Strood Rural and that. The most complaints I get is about 133 and a 191, and I think even our leader got stuck on the top of Phil Elms Hill for 2 hours waiting for a 191. But I just wondered, is there any, we're building more houses out on the peninsula. Is there any plans going forward for, you know, upgrading the system? Or are you looking at it in advance with the new houses coming in?
I mean, so the 133 and the 191 are probably our two most challenging routes to operate. Strood is a particular bottleneck, and we find any services that go through Strood do struggle. In terms of new housing, it's all tied into the phasing and when the housing comes, and then there'll be funding from the housing to sort of kickstart the new services. It all depends on what housing comes where in terms of the specifics.
Yeah, with the 191 particularly, I think a lot of people on the peninsula would use it a bit more, but even myself, I live in Wainscott, and we've caught the 191 opposite Sandsparrell a couple of times, and great. And then we go around the following week to go uptown to go and see a show or something, and the bus doesn't turn up, and then suddenly it's all thrown in. So it's not always bad, but it just seems to be bad at the times you don't want it, sort of thing. But as you say, it's particularly challenging out there, isn't it? I know.
Yeah, I mean, Norman touched on the geography of Medway, and the challenge is there's a river through the middle of Medway, and there's limited numbers of crossing points. And what we see is when one of those is affected, the other two just take all the rest of the traffic and gridlock. And it is a real challenge running buses through those circumstances.
And we've had a particularly bad 2 days in Strood this week, where services have simply collapsed, with no warning to the bus operators, so we have to do our best. But inevitably, we ended up diverting buses away from the congestion in order to make sure that the areas further out were able to maintain the service.
People who go somewhere and can't get there.
That's what they remember. So what we needed really is the fabled bridge from Isle of Grain to Gillingham. That would solve a bit of the problem for that out on the internet. Right, thanks very much anyway for your answers.
Thank you. I was going to say, as somebody who represents Strood, absolutely that's a bottleneck. I'm just wondering, in terms of Medway Council, firstly, what are there any plans to improve congestion in Strood Town Centre? There have been previous suggestions of potentially red routing to reduce some of that congestion in there. And secondly, as we talk about congestion, again, one of the big causes is utilities. I'm just wondering, have we got anywhere further in terms of lane rental and making sure that utility providers aren't necessarily blocking up the roads unnecessarily?
Thank you, Chair. I can come back on two of those points. I think in terms of the lane rental, I'll probably have a conversation with Karen in Highways on that one, and we can come back on that. We're very aware of the issues that Strood has and the problems, and we saw it this week. I got stuck in it myself. What we are doing, yes, there is some work around thinking about the potential for a red route around Strood Town Centre. So we need to do some feasibility work on that. It's by no means guaranteed to come in or be supported, but it's really important we actually do the feasibility work on that to understand if parking is causing an issue in Strood Town Centre, as opposed to other conditions that might be affecting traffic congestion. We have a pretty important scheme for us in terms of upgrading and optimising our traffic signal infrastructure, and there's a key focus this year on the Rochester Strood route on the A2. So that work is coming forward, and we feel that actually there'll be some really significant gains there. Some of our traffic signal equipment is now obsolete. The scoot system and the systems of control for the traffic signals hasn't been working as effectively as it could be for many years. So we are delivering on that this year. And we expect to see some pretty good improvements on that key corridor. So yes, very aware of those issues on the A2, and there are plans in place to try to help that situation.
Thank you. Just Rob Common, thank you.
Yeah, just additionally to that, the roadworks this week in Strood were emergency works with Southern Water, and under the Streetworks legislation, any utility company can go in if it's classed an emergency and inform the council 2 hours after the event. I think it's fair to say that us and operators work very well when it's planned closures, planned maintenance, and planned works across the network. But with the best will in the world, emergencies happen, gas leaks happen, water leaks happen, and we don't have actually any control when and where they can take place. So if it happens in the wrong place, it can be a major issue.
We might well bring that up in the next agenda item. So thanks for that print. Councillor Brake, were you coming on this specific point here? I just saw an indication. Sorry, no, not, was that Councillor Brake or Councillor Kemp? Sorry, I saw a hand go up. Rob. Yeah, okay, thanks. I still have Councillor Hamilton next, please. I saw your hand close.
It's okay, we're all very collegiate here. Okay, so my questions really relate to the experience of older residents in my ward in Rochester. And I'm quite alarmed that for many of them, the current timetabling is really not fit for purpose. Many of the residents that both Councillor Bowen and I have spoken to have raised serious concerns that the current network leads to further social isolation for them. They are dependent on bus services to, for instance, go from the place where they live to GP appointments, to hospital, to shopping, and in order for them to do that, the last bus that they can get back to Rochester is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So they are effectively being isolated. So my questions really relate to what are you going to do about that? So how does the current Medway network reflect the needs of older residents in areas such as Rochester? What engagement have you had with the council, health partners and local older people's groups when planning service changes? Because they seem to be planned but not to the benefit of local older residents. And have you undertaken an equality impact assessment on any timetable reductions or route withdrawals? So these are my questions for the moment on behalf of my residents.
Thank you. And sorry, just Councillor Bone was just saying that she's got a couple of examples to illustrate this. So if you want to do that now, Councillor Bone.
Okay, so a couple of sheltered housing in our ward. Got the Queen Mother Court, which is served by a new venture bus, and I've been in correspondence with Rob about this. We went to visit them. They would like I think, yeah, this is the one Councillor Hamilton's referring to it. For the last bus is about 2 o'clock. They'd like it to run later. They tell me it's normally busy, but it's quite isolated. There's no, I mean, somebody who doesn't have a car, can't afford a cab, they're stuck there, basically, if they can't get a bus. And a bus returning at 2 is pretty inconvenient. So there's that. There's the 155, which goes from Borstal to Chatham, which is an Arriva bus. It would be lovely if that could just swing round and take in Strood. I don't know if that's feasible, but a lot of that goes past another sheltered accommodation. A lot of those residents would love to be able to go shopping in Strood and just get one bus. So it's things like that. But I mean, if you ever want to go and visit any of these sheltered accommodations, I'm sure they'd love to bend your ear about the bus service.
Tag team, we really do want to get the voice of our residents across here very loudly. So in both circumstances, our older residents' ability to live full lives is being restricted by the timetabling of the services. So 2 o'clock, and I think it's 4 o'clock for the 155. Neither of those constitute a quality of life for our residents. It's restricting their ability to enjoy their later life, and really we're very keen to see what actual engagement have you had in terms of talking to older groups.
I think you're referring to the 156 service, which runs from memory 3 times a day. It's a service which is funded by Medway Council, and in order to give value for money, it fits in between the commitments that buses have to take students to and from school. So obviously, perhaps not obviously, but certainly a fact is that buses are busiest at school times, which we'll call peak times, and off-peak there is less demand. We can use buses at school times then to run off-peak services. The specification for the 156 service, and I don't think there's any issue necessarily with the route that the bus takes. It uses narrow roads and it has to operate a circular route. But in terms of frequency, how often it runs, I don't believe that it would be a commercial proposition, but it might be that Medway Council, through bus grant, would be able to find a way to secure a greater level of service. Certainly, if there's a proven demand for that service, if there's funding, I'm sure any bus operator would be prepared to take on the challenge of running it. But the current timetable is that which is prescribed by Medway, and as an operator, we certainly do our utmost to make sure that it runs properly, it runs to time with drivers who do the job properly. So I think the issue is quantity rather than quality here, and an expansion of the time to cover more of the day. I would comment, though, that people probably of my vintage, we tend to be more set in our ways in terms of going shopping and so on. And I haven't heard any criticism that the bus doesn't fulfil most people's needs. I think what you're looking at is that there's a wider part of the working day, of the day, that should be looked at. I would caution, though, the constraint that the narrow roads, which are heavily parked, could make it difficult to serve the 156 route beyond the current times. But I'm very happy to look at it in more detail.
No, it's not on.
the residents would be if, but thank you.
And just to follow up, you haven't really answered the questions about what engagement you've had with older groups. You're just making assumptions about the patterns that people have in their daily lives. So, but have you actually gone out and consulted with older residents on what they need and their experiences of the service? And again, with health partners and with the council. So maybe a bit more of a joined up thinking would be good.
I'm very happy to engage with yourselves and with Mr. Carman.
Thanks. It's quite an interesting point there in terms of Medway. We run a deregulated bus network that in theory is free competition, but there's a number of journeys that need to be socially subsidised, that socially necessary, that are subsidised, and the cost of those journeys can be quite expensive. I'm just wondering, so obviously we have an enhanced partnership that works between operators and the council. What I'm wondering is what is the main way that communities can feed in to those discussions about what a network looks like, what routes are subsidised, what routes are commercial, and that actually where can the community involvement go into actually talking about the timetabling? I mean, my favourite example is trying to get a bus from Strood to Cliff, and there's a wonderful, it's half hourly except for a 3-hour gap between 1:30 and 4:30, which is the issue of school buses. That's essentially, that's your prime market. But what I just want to know is that we have an enhanced partnership that is trying to sort out, you know, some sort of coordination and cooperation, but I'm not quite sure where the community involvement kicks into that.
Yeah, I think regarding the 156 and 155, I mean, it just comes down to cost. I mean, they're not commercial routes. We step in and fund them, otherwise there'd be nothing there at all. So we could put extra services on, but you probably took in doubling the contract price, which would then mean we'd have to probably look at withdrawing something from elsewhere. So it's trying to strike a right balancing act of providing the services, at least covering all areas. I mean, I think Medway compares a lot better than other areas when we do have most areas covered at least 5 days a week, often have 7-day-a-week service. Regarding the enhanced partnership, it's mainly made up of operators and the council. Obviously, for the BSIP, when it came in, we did a consultation at that stage. I think asking the public, everyone wants a bus down their road when they want it, so it's just trying to, we use formulas and tables and methods to prioritise where we need the buses based on cost and efficiency. So ultimately it does come down to money if you want more buses in all areas.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, just some feedback, I think, you know, from my perspective and perspective of those that I speak to. Firstly, just to say a big thank you for the Sweeps Festival, for the free buses that weekend, to all those involved in that. It was a really exciting community experience to get the bus over those days. I know that sounds slightly over the top, but it really was. I did so with my teenage daughter. Again, I see about, you know, young people in the report. There was a real community feel on those buses. They were absolutely packed. People really enjoyed that experience, and it really started the kind of festival feel. So that was really great. And also I wanted to feedback and say that very often on social media, people praise our bus drivers for their support of our community in times of people in need, assaults that have happened or people being taken ill. And very, very often on social media, particularly in our area in Walderslade, where we're near to the routes in and out of Maidstone, and people are taking kind of, you know, quite long journeys, there's very often some very positive feedback about people being really well supported, and we're really grateful. I'm really interested about young people. A lot of our young people are totally reliant, as you've said, on their buses to and from school, and really grateful for that. But I'm really curious about young people out of school hours wanting to access wider facilities, for example, Medway Music Centre at the Maths School on a Saturday, residents in Walderside having to get 2 buses in and out of Chatham for young people, and how we can better serve routes for young people who are taking part in after-school activities and getting them to and from. And also, I've just, double-checked on my phone the Arriva app, making sure that we've got that and we can really track what's coming when, and when the bus is going to be late, we know why, and parents are aware, because I think that use of digital is going to be absolutely essential, and particularly as a parent of an autistic young person, to know exactly why the bus isn't there when it should be is absolutely crucial. So some positive feedback and just a little bit more, please, around, young people and engagement of young people on the buses. Thank you.
Thank you for the positive comments about our drivers and Norman's drivers. And I think all the bus drivers in Medway are fantastic. I think they do a great job. Sometimes it's not easy for them, but I think many of them go above and beyond. I think it's also worth remembering that they are part of the community. Most of them live in Medway, they work in Medway, their families are in Medway, they go to school in Medway, their kids. In terms of the technology, definitely. I mean, I've been in the industry 20 years now, and that's the big difference I've seen. We can track buses now, we can see how late they are, we can cancel them on the apps. We've just launched a new app a couple of months ago, and it's light years ahead of where we were before. It's really good. I think in terms of young people, I think that those later journeys and that length of day, I think that's something that the Medway BSIP's done really well with in terms of enhancing those evening services, where the volumes aren't necessarily there for commercial services, but by using that funding to enhance that length of day, it gives that offering for more people. And I think Medway's done really good there, personally.
I was going to say, you mentioned ticketing. I mean, do we see a situation where eventually we would have a fairly, dare I say it, he says, a London-esque type, simple, multi-operator, capped ticketing that's simple and quite cohesive and good value? Is the BSIP work in any way towards that? Because one of the issues is you've got M passes, you've got Arriva-only tickets, you've got Plus Bus. Some of the ticketing could be quite opaque, and I just wonder whether the BSIP and Enhanced Partnership is really trying to get a grip on getting a good, simple ticketed product that can reduce the barriers to get people on the buses.
Yeah, we're currently working on an all-operator ticket as part of the Enhanced Partnership criteria from the government. We need to launch that by next spring. So we are working with the operators to have an all-operator, at least day and week ticket to begin with. Separately to that, the government and the DFT is working on Project Coral, which is like a national fare capping, tap in and tap off scheme similar to London. So we're watching that with a watching brief. Of course, any of this may become superfluous if we become part of a wider Kent situation where we may take on some of the wider Kent tickets 2028. So the danger is not to spend too much money now. It's time to get superseded in a couple of years. But I think in the meantime, we will try and get a simplified all-operator ticket available. Not all bells and whistles, because that may be coming further down the line. Thank you.
Very interesting. On this point, Councillor Bowen, yeah? Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Jones next.
Thank you, Chair. I think most of what I was going to say has been addressed by virtue that you've yourself took up the cudgels on Strood, and by Mr. Edwards' answers on the subject, which were very helpful. But a couple of perhaps loose ends in terms of Strood bus services. We've mentioned digital, and I very much hope Strood is going to benefit from the digital time displays that are coming on stream, etc., because I think it is an area which would benefit. And my second point is outside the town centre, and whether our bus operator friends have of any idea as to how we're getting on through the sort of housing estates in Strood, because you have a tremendous issue of car ownership and car parking, or company cars, various cars being parked in the Strood area, which can get in the way of the bus lanes, so or bus stops, I should say. So reassuring that red routes and what have you are being looked at for the town centre, but there is a wider issue, which I think the Arriva representative has already touched on, about getting through Strood generally. Thank you.
Thank you. So, did you want to come in?
There are some areas of Strood where the service is, again, a limited one, funded by Medway Council, talking about northwest of Strood, Brompton Farm Road and so on, which are services that we provide. They're poorly supported, but people regard it as a lifeline. We tend not to be in the Darnley Road area, which obviously is where Arriva mainly operate. But there could be opportunities, because Strood appears to be enjoying a degree of prosperity in terms of retail, which is lacking certainly in Chatham. And I can envisage a longer term refocusing more on Strood, because that's where passengers want to go.
May I come back briefly, Chair? I was thinking more of the sort of Darnley Road area and the tree-named roads up by sort of Laburnum, etc., Holly, and around that area. Your answer's very helpful, but the very fact, if I'm not tempting fate, the very fact that our Arriva representative hasn't come back and said, yes, there's a tremendous problem, indicates to me at the moment things must be running pretty smoothly. If you've not heard from your drivers that, you know, there is still an issue with parked cars, maybe the problem is being resolved.
There are issues at times, and it's often not a lot of parked cars, it's a few in the wrong places. So Darnley Road's a particular challenge, where if the car's parked too close to the traffic islands, the buses end up having to go on the wrong side of the road. We have issues around school times, so we reroute some of the 140s at school times because of parked cars. We have a good relationship with Medway Council though. We talk to them a lot, and they get out there and fix things. And I mean, a good example's probably up on the 166 at Lordswood outside Tesco, where we used to have a real problem there, and that's been resolved through good signage, enforcement cameras.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Brake, talking of Lordswood.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your contributions this evening, most useful. I've got a couple of points. First of all, I have every sympathy with you when you talk about the congestion in Strood, and I think all of us sympathise with you, because I think all of us probably travel through Strood at one time or another, and so you're not the only ones that are facing congestion. But I must say that my personal observations would suggest that the run through from say Gillingham through to Chatham, through to Rochester to Strood, it all seems to stop at Rochester Bridge. And the moment you get there, that's when the congestion really starts. I'm outlining this because my point is a direct question for both of you, really, and that is that the report mentions your cooperation with Medway Council, but have you two, both companies, ever made direct representation to Medway Council concerning the congestion, concerning the fact that buses are always late because of that congestion? And one thing that really captured my mind, captured my eye, in fact, was it talks about upgrading bus stops, shelters and passenger information. And I looked at shelters and I thought, well, the way the buses do run, you do need shelters, because when it's pouring down with rain, who wants to be stuck out there waiting for a bus and there's no shelter? So it does appear that this is a chicken and egg situation. But really my question, first point I wanted to raise was about Strood, and that is, have you made a direct representation to Medway Council regarding the congestion, together with suggestions and ideas as to how this could be improved? That's point one, Mr. Chair.
Yes, I mean, we meet with the officers regularly. I look at the problem from a bus perspective, and if it was purely a bus solution, it'd probably make one of the bridges bus only. But I don't think that would work from a wider perspective. I think the challenge with congestion is the unpredictability of it. If we know it's going to take 10 minutes every time, we can timetable for that. If today it takes 10 minutes, tomorrow it takes 20, the day after it takes 5, we can't timetable around that. So we either pad our timetables to an extent that they're waiting around to cope with the average, and then other days they don't have enough. And Rochester bridges are one of those examples where it's very variable. You can't predict what it's going to be like day to day, hour to hour. It just goes down and gets gridlocked. We've done a lot of work looking at timetables. We seem to review the timetables about once a year in Medway. And every time we put more time in and we use the GPS data, and we have seen improvements in punctuality. Our punctuality in Medway is just over 80%. If I was sitting here a few years ago, it would have been in the 70s. So we have moved it forward. But our challenge is every time we move it forward, it lasts so long and then the traffic changes and we've got to jump in again and try again.
Thank you for that. Sorry, Mr. Kemp.
On a day-to-day basis, I make sure that the officers are informed of any significant delays and any patterns that emerge. We can discuss. The bus operators meet with council officers on a formal basis about 3 times a year, and that's always a useful exchange of not just views but concerns. On streetworks, the team that Paul Wood leads is particularly helpful. And when we have issues, our vehicles incidentally have forward-facing cameras, so we can send a picture of a roadworks set that's suddenly sprung up, which does happen. And the streetworks team are very good at clamping down on any works which are in the wrong place or perhaps not authorised. It's that relationship with Medway that helps to keep the buses running as on time as they are. And the figures that we all have to monitor, in our case, we're in the 80% as well, which could be improved, but that does reflect the churn that one day is not the same as another. But I must again pay tribute to the fact that we do speak to Medway. It's a proactive relationship.
Thanks. I was going to say, this gives me a lovely opportunity, Councillor Brake, but one of the things I understand in the bus service improvement plan this year is looking more at more data, more use of AI in some of those products. So the example I can think of is my favourite 190, which can quite often, particularly in the evening peaks when I want to go to a council meeting, it appears at my bus stop sometimes 5, 6, 7 minutes early, and then depending on what the traffic is and the approach to Strood, it can then wait for 5, 10 minutes just by Rochester Bridge just to make sure it's on timetable. Now, luckily, I can live track now, but previously, if I'd have run on a timetable on a half-hourly service, that screwed me up. That's maybe miss a meeting, etc. Do we think that is there better? Are we in the position where we can better align our timetables to be more reliable and to use products of more live data, AI and that types of things to actually make sure that the timetable really fits live conditions? Abate unpredictability is the bane of things.
Yes, definitely. I think data has changed fundamentally. We've got so much data now. I think our challenge has been how do we get the data to something we can use effectively. This year, Riva invested in a partnership with a company called CitySwift, who use AI and use that technology to do that for us. So they take all of our timetable data, they take all of our GPS data, all the passenger data, and they produce scenarios of basically punctuality. And they say, well, if you change the timetable by this, you can get this much punctuality improvement. We can take timetables and we can put it in and it'll tell us what the punctuality will be. And the best thing is it does it really easily and quickly. So our plan is probably in the autumn to put every timetable in Medway through that system. And yeah, we expect improvements. Where we've done it elsewhere, we've seen 2 to 3% punctuality improvements. and that is just using the data we've got more effectively.
The challenge in a small business is that we don't have the administrative team in place that can turn its attention to handling, again, the huge amount of data that we have. This would be an ideal project to co-fund, obviously, with Medway, and I believe there is provision in the bus grant for the coming 3-year period.
I was going to say, actually, because obviously you're representative, Arriva, the dominant group, but New Venture as well as ASD and Chalkwell, you know, support that. Is there support for making sure that the smaller companies that provide an excellent service, but probably don't have the economies of scale that, say, an Arriva have, to be able to cooperate and to support to make sure that they can have access to this type of data and to make sure that their key specific services can also help to make sure that we get the punctuality up there?
Yeah, the City Swift software that Mike was talking about, we are speaking at the moment with the provider to roll it out to other operators, so they'll all have a log on soon, be able to access the same functionality and processes that Arriva can see. I think it's currently working our way through procurement at the moment, so hopefully should be able to launch that across the summer with the small operators. But yeah, the idea is be a level playing field for all, so the ASD and New Venture can also use the software as they see fit, and we can access it as well to monitor routes and prioritise works and bus stops, etc. So yeah, it's on its way.
Excellent, really good to say. Okay, the last person I have to... Councillor Lawrence hasn't spoken yet, and I know how much he loves his buses.
I did say there was...
But if you just want to say, chip in here.
But no, the final point I wanted to ask you about, please, with the run up or run down to net zero, which isn't all that long away, how confident are you both as companies of achieving the government objectives? And how much do you think it is actually going to cost you as organisations to achieve that target? Thank you.
So from where we are sitting here today, we need support to invest in zero emission vehicles. If we go out to buy vehicles today, it's quite a simple choice. Do we buy 2 brand new diesel vehicles or 1 electric vehicle? And the electric vehicle comes with more challenges in terms of how you run it. The economies aren't there yet where it's comparable. So the government have done some schemes where they've sort of part funded the difference. Our view is that needs to continue to help operators to do that. I think the other thing is that there's a huge step going from a diesel depot to electric depot. You've got to change the way you work, you've got to change the layout of the depot, you've got to really look at the infrastructure, and that is a big step as well. I think if the support is there, we can do it, because we've done it elsewhere. We've got electric buses in London, we've got electric buses in Leicester, we're rolling them out elsewhere in the country. But the key to unlocking that support has been that sort of help funding to bridge the gap between the diesel bus and the electric bus.
I was going to say, just on that point, a lot of that's come through councils, isn't it? Councils have tended to bid for electric vehicles. Is it a bit of a chicken and egg that you need the facilities, but you need to know that you're going to get the pipeline, and the council needs to know that the facility is there to be able to bid for that? And how do we square that circle?
We've worked hard over the years to gradually replace older vehicles with Euro 5 and Euro 6. But as a small business or a smaller business and dependent in this area on winning contracts from the local authority, the cost of reaching net zero will eventually fall, at least partly, on the local authority, because if I specify an electric vehicle, the cost of that will inevitably fall onto the local authority as part of the contract price. There's a willingness to do it, but it will eventually wash through in higher contract prices, unless, and hopefully perhaps, more passengers, more people using buses would actually help to contribute more to the cost of running that bus. We shouldn't become a subsidy junkie. We should be doing everything we can to encourage passenger usage of buses as well, by attractive promotions, attractive fares, and above all, just simply being reliable. And yes, listening to our passengers or our potential passengers.
Sorry, how much? What do you believe to be the cost of the transformation to get to that target? Please.
So in terms of Arriva in Gillingham, so we operate about 80 vehicles. Electric vehicles are between 400, 500,000 pounds each. So you're looking at 30 to 40 million for the fleet. The infrastructure is, it can be cheap, it can be expensive. The actual on-site infrastructure is not too bad. The challenge is getting the volume of electricity as such to the site. So another depot I've been working with currently, if we wanted to do 20 vehicles, the cost of that cable was about 200,000. If we wanted to do 21, it's shot up to 2 million. And that is because the substation nearby doesn't have capacity. So you're then pumping a new cable 2 miles away to the next substation. I think that's where we need a bit of support in terms of sort of the infrastructure around it. I mean, in terms of schemes that the government have run, they ran a scheme called Zebra, which we bid for in a number of locations, and that has driven investment in places like Leicester. And the terms of that scheme were the government effectively paid 75% of the difference between diesel and electric. So Arriva stepped up and paid the cost of a diesel bus plus a bit more, and then they paid 3/4 of the infrastructure costs as well. But when it comes to electric buses, money doesn't go very far. It just always comes in the tens of millions. And
there's a lot of shillings that go in the meter, isn't it? Thank you. Chairman, could I suggest that included in the this particular item that our transport people consider this issue and we start drawing together plans of where we are today, the cost of the transformation and the time it's going to take. What is going to be the impact of net zero on Medway when it comes to the target? Thank you.
So specification. So you're talking about, so just to get this recommendation correct, you're referring to the impact of the banning of are you talking about the removal of the internal combustion engines essentially to electric, or are you talking about the process of making our fleet electric? Two slightly different angles of looking at it. Okay, yes, excellent. Okay. Electrification of our fleet, yeah. Rob.
I think it's important to note at this stage, unlike with cars and private vehicles where there's a 2035 cut-off date, the DfT has not actually announced a cut-off date for buses or HGVs yet. So I think when and if we get a date for that, there'll be more incentive from government or more plans in place. The second-hand electric vehicle market might spring to life a bit. So at this moment in time, there's no deadline when you can no longer buy a diesel bus.
That's a good point. But yeah, I suppose a note to the committee around electrification and I would also, air quality improvements of the bus network would be useful, I think. Councillor Lawrence, I think I have you last but not least. Our Councillor Gilborn's just got there. Thank you.
No, it's been a really interesting conversation, just listening to different perspectives from across the chamber, and thank you for coming. I don't know if it's one of your new venture buses I pass in Boxley every evening coming back from Maidstone, but it's one of these little small buses, and how he actually gets down through Boxley village is absolutely amazing. I think that leads me, sort of segues me neatly into some of the development that's happening in Hempstead and Wigmore, where I represent. I'm thinking particularly of Lidsing, I'm thinking particularly of Gibraltar Farm, and the wider plan is, how's the bus service going to get into those developments? Because the extension of North Bain Way to the M4, for example, isn't going to happen immediately. And I think talking about isolation, we're going to see communities not being able to access buses, which unfortunately only then encourages car use. I think just another comment. I've noticed, I've been living in Hempstead for 19 years, and the increase in traffic coming off the M2 going down Hoath Way towards is just exploded. And I think, you know, if we had a big picture, it is the widening of the M2 going east would relieve a lot of traffic coming through Medway, trying to avoid the accidents that happen near Sittingbourne every single day. So I think just another comment on buses. I mean, I've got a bus stop right outside my house. It's got 3 people on it every time it stops. I think that just sort of sums up our challenge. And I was very interested, some of the comments colleagues opposite were making about the bus service not meeting the needs of people, but that bus service has been commissioned by Medway Council. So I think there's another challenge there that Medway Council needs to be thinking about how it can. And I think if we're talking about more entrepreneurial solutions, you see these smaller community buses that just do specific things. There might be like a transit van or something that's bigger that actually meets the needs of some of those smaller communities. Maybe not necessarily run by the bus service, but maybe commissioned by the council. But that could be something guys might think is an opportunity. I do also think there's an opportunity for buses to actually be providing some really good information through display boards. We talk a lot in the council about how do we get the message out about things that are going on. The local plan message, for example, is a classic one where, you know, every opportunity people have got to see information about the council. So I don't know whether you're planning that type of upgrade, but if you can carry some council messages, I think that would help generally. So just in terms of questions, and you know, I agree that all the comments I've had about the bus service about you're brilliant drivers. I think that's great. Apart from the one who parks in Wigmore, I don't know if it's I think it's a new venture one, I'm really sorry. He parks in Wigmore because sometimes he gets there a bit early and he uses it as a bit of a waiting time. And we have asked him to turn off his engine and he doesn't always turn off his engine. But it's a really minor point.
That's an ASD one.
Oh, is that an ASD? I'm really sorry. It shows you how often I get a bus, doesn't it? Okay, just thank you. I've just got a couple of questions really. Just be interested to get your feedback. Obviously, the bus improvement plan, there's been lots of consultation. We've had lots of really interesting discussion. I'm just wondering if you guys had written the bus improvement plan. I know you've consulted on it, but what would you have put in it that's not currently in it that you think would have actually improved things like travel times? Because I think the reason people don't use buses is because they're really worried about, can I get from Hempstead to Rochester in time to be there in time for work, having dropped the kids off from school? Yeah.
Last year I was in Holland, in a city called Leiden, and their approach to transport is very different. They have very similar historic town centres and city centres to us, but their priority is you put the cycle lanes in first, you put the pavements in, you put the bus lanes in, and whatever's left is the space for the cars. And what they have is an amazing bus service. It's frequent, it's fast, it's direct, and it's the logical choice. You'd be an idiot to drive a car because the bus is so good. I think sometimes in the UK we hide behind the fact that we can't do changes because the roads are too narrow or they need to be parking outside shops or it needs to be sort of historic. And I think if I was writing it, I'd be more ambitious and bold and say we should be looking at getting journey times down. As an example, one area we serve is Luton and Dunstable. They opened up a guided busway probably about 10 years ago. Between Luton and Dunstable, it was an old railway. It cut the journey times from end to end by about 50%. And because of that, the buses you had on that corridor could operate the same route a lot more frequently. And the growth was stratospheric. You look at the numbers they're carrying compared to then, it was a real success. And I think if you can deliver that infrastructure on the big scale, and I think that's where the new housing, new development comes in, if you can tie that to infrastructure that changes the game and makes it such that why would you drive a car and the bus is quicker and easier, then I think you get that step change in reliability and usage, and it just becomes a catalyst. It just keeps driving further and further investment.
Try again. But there is a need for new developments to have a bus service from day one. The first occupation should have a bus service in place, and that rarely happens anywhere in the UK and infrequently in Medway. However, we know that some developers are now thinking about the next stages of developments in various parts of Medway, and hopefully through Medway's planners, we'll see yet more cooperation in terms of putting the basics of a bus service into these new areas. But it is lacking. The bus services don't often get into developments until well into the completion of that development, by which time people have decided that they're going to use a car or walk or cycle or whatever. So we would always urge bus on day one.
I think that's a really interesting point. But I think our problem in Medway is going to be the houses are going to be built before the infrastructure's there, and all we're doing is storing up that problem. And I know the planning team are aware of this, but I think there is no solutions because there's no money to put the infrastructure in first. Like North Dane Way extension would be the logical first step for opening up that entire area, but that isn't going to happen, I don't think, straight away. I think in terms of new housing developments, especially those at scale, having a centre where a bus can stop and there's a school, a pub, a shop, so they're not dispersed around. You actually have a natural centre with a good area for a bus to pull in is probably the way to go. But I like that idea. Just, we've not mentioned...
I was going to say, on this, I'm going to continue to talk about planning and new housing infrastructure, because I think we've got by a happy coincidence, who are merely typing away thinking, this is buses, but actually, this is a very good point in terms of new developments, and we've got exactly that corridor, the North Dane Way, Gibraltar Farm, Lidsing, you know. Sorry?
The key point I was making, the key point I was making about it, I know about the North Dane Way, but the problem with it is it's not going to be built. Last time I heard, it wasn't necessarily going to be built straight away. So we're going to put 800 or 900 houses in first, and then maybe it will be opened up. That's the point I think I was making.
Yeah.
But I think also I make a wider point about as we plan these new developments, we plan for the infrastructure that would then allow buses in.
Dare I say a fast track style approach for that corridor, particularly going on there? And obviously we've got local government reorg, and that's a whole different question. But you need to be thinking about those timescales. So I do wonder also, you know, what in terms of planning, local plan, and going forwards, how are we looking to make sure that we've got a cohesive joined up, that we're not just doing little quick fixes here, but actually thinking about, okay, this is the infrastructure we've got. What are we thinking in terms of particularly that key corridor? Who would be the other example as well?
Yeah, Chair, thank you very much. Don't wish to contradict anyone, but it is absolutely integral to our thinking in terms of bus services. Number of things that we've done now. We've relatively recently appointed Jeremy as a strategic transport officer, specifically to not only look at the highway mitigations, but very much so the fast track, the priority towards buses, linking buses with railways as well, working very closely with Michael's team. We also encourage, I'll cover two things: developments, planning applications, and also a local plan. So local plan, it's absolutely critical to the work of the local plan that we don't rely on the car. We've got to factor in public transport. We've got to factor in walking, cycling as well. North Gillingham, for instance, we've got the old railway line, bringing that back in. That's a fundamental part of that proposal on North Gillingham. And I take Councillor Lawrence's point. It's important that these pieces of infrastructure are brought through early. Out on the Hoo Peninsula, we're looking at a transport hub there, which will link to a transport hub in Strood. And we're looking at ways that can link up without the point that in terms of that constraint of Strood, how do we get those two hubs to link up without that constraint? So working very closely with Michael's team, Rob, James, and also the bus companies in relation to that. In terms of big applications, And apologies, Jill, because I I keep mentioning this and I'm boring the pants off people. Having sat through 2 public inquiries so far and about to sit through my 3rd in the matter of just a few weeks, buses are absolutely critical, and we're saying to developers, have those early conversations. And I know, Michael, some of those developers have approached you in advance on those. We're talking to them about the bus priorities. We're talking to them about how they're going to deal with that, make developments more sustainable, encouraging them to talk to Arriva, getting significant contributions, at least offered to us, if not gained through section 106. And on that, the design of schemes, fundamentally, we're looking at how the schemes can be designed to give priority to bus services. So those key roads which go through developments, making sure that there's no parking on those roads, so the buses can travel quickly. North Dane Way, you've talked about that, where Wimpy and Vistry are currently developing. There was a route linking from the Wagon at Hale through to North Dane Way. That road, again, is that link road. It will be of a sufficient width for buses. There won't be parking on there. Bus stops are planned for it, which link into footpaths, which link into what's going to be provided on that site. And one of the first things that goes in will be that road link. So, and then the other thing is that with Section 106 is on large-scale developments. We don't want people to get used to the point that you've said, getting in their car and driving. So we require developers to come up with a travel plan as part of that, to give free bus travel for first occupants for the first year, so they get used to going by bus. So all of these things that we're doing, working very closely with the gentleman there.
Thank you. And
Yeah, no, I'm not going to come back because Dave and I will disagree fundamentally on the fact that individuals want to make choices. And if everything's just built around a bus that operates between 8 and 6, it's going to be very difficult. You know, we've seen where we give them free bus weekends. They're great. And I think Councillor Cook mentioned the one, but it hasn't increased bus usage. Well, it hasn't, because the numbers are we're still 6 years after COVID. And for me, this is about Medway's economy is going to depend on people being able to get around at all times of the day, not just between the times that the buses operate. But it's a point we can debate. Can I just mention one other thing, Chair? Because we've not mentioned the F word.
Go on.
Well, it's in your report. I mean, I cannot believe no one has mentioned bus franchising.
You were alluding to it, actually.
I really couldn't let it go, but I just wondered if you want to give your view before I give you my view. Since this is your item, Chair.
Thank you. I think it's an interesting question, because actually, I mean, one of the things we're looking at is we're talking about, okay, there's commercial route, commercial base, but then there's subsidy. The subsidy is very high. Well, actually, does it just not make sense to cross-subsidise and have one straight cross? Now, that would probably be my thoughts. I suppose the issue is we've got local government review, haven't we? And mayoralties and where that devolution comes from. So we could... I personally think there is merit in it, and that might be a solution. The question is we probably need to think about, we're not going to sort that out in the next 2 years whilst we're in Medway. But it's about making sure our policies going forwards don't preclude that. It's probably what I'd say.
Okay, so I still don't, well, okay, so you are in favour of franchising. Okay, I think when you replace a public monopoly with private monopolies, you don't get any different outcomes. I think having a mix of operators is the way it's going. I just wonder, I'm sure Arriva have got routes maybe up north where there's a by-election going on at the moment. I just wonder what Arriva's view is on franchising, bus franchising, and I don't know whether New Venture you've even thought about it, given that where you're located. But I just wonder, do you think bus franchising, if it occurred in our bit of Kent, would actually improve the service, or is it more fundamental around things like infrastructure and other things?
So Riva work in franchise markets and non-franchise markets. We're one of the biggest operators in London. I think the question's probably the wrong question. It's not, is franchising the answer? It's what is the problem? Does franchising fix that? And I think that the challenges we face in the bus industry is one of funding. Our network's predominantly commercial, so the funding for the network comes from the people using it. That supports a level of network. If there's a huge pot of money that can do more, then franchising is definitely the way to go. But if there isn't a pot of money, then what we're doing now is probably good value for what it can deliver. I think, yeah, it all comes down to how we fund buses. In this country, we predominantly a deregulated market, and the funding is pretty minimal.
We would respond to any change of approach. Franchising typically has, in the example so far, has seen just one operator provide the services in a franchised area. And the small and medium enterprises such as mine have to an extent felt left out of the process. We think that we can deliver as much as any other bus company without being big-headed about it. So hopefully, if there were to be franchising, there would be a role for a range of operators providing a range of services. The only caution is it does seem to be very, very expensive for the local authorities who undertake it.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I think the other issue is, and Councillor Brake mentioned it about the decarbonisation, all that cost would obviously fall on the council to do if we went down that franchising model. And I'm always remember, I think your 2019 manifesto, Chair, was you're going to run your own bus company. And then COVID came along, and that would have been a disaster for the taxpayers of Medway if we'd have started a bus company and then some event like COVID had come along. Anyway, thank you very much indeed. Thanks.
Thank you. It's always interesting to discuss that, but then again, of course, you can look at the costs of not providing a universal service and actually how they're monetised and how that works. I've got three more people indicating. I have Councillor Gilbourne, then Councillor Peake, and then for the last contribution, Councillor Jones wanted a final bite of the cherry. Councillor Gill.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Some of it's already been covered by Councillor Lawrence in terms of new development and the option for smaller routes, shorter routes for shuttle buses and things like that, which we remember talking in the Lidsing steering group about that as well. Even just a shuttle bus in Thames Valley Shopping Centre could be very useful from day one. But people don't want to just go shopping. They want to get to other services in Medway. So my sort of question was more about for young people, particularly, as you know, secondary school age, they might be going to school on the buses at the moment, and they're dotted all around Medway, and even people from Hampstead and Wigmore go to a range of schools. But when they get back, it's mum or dad need to give them a lift back to where they want to be, which could be in Rochester, could be a sports centre, something like that. And it doesn't seem that the bus services are adequate enough to support that, what I would see as that demand, unless the young person is prepared to sit on the bus for 45 minutes to get there and make a change at Chatham, to get to somewhere in Rochester and things like that. And I don't know whether this aspect of more flexibility with smaller buses has been considered by operators like yourself, just so that people genuinely have a choice of what to do rather than just ask mum and dad. Thank you.
I think there's 2 points there. I think the first one is that the evening bus network in Medway is pretty good in terms of the level of service. I mean, we run buses from about 4 in the morning to midnight, and yeah, most services have at least a half-hourly evening service. I think that question about orbital routes or joining the dots, Medway is a very challenging place to operate buses because it's not like a city centre, everything goes into it. The challenge with orbital routes is there's a lot more flows. You can't combine those flows. So into the town centres, you combine lots of flows into one corridor, and that gives you sufficient revenue to give a good frequency. When you start doing lots of radial routes, everybody wants to do something slightly different, and you end up with less frequency, and then it's just not attractive. In terms of small vehicles, we've done lots of experiments with them. The challenge you have with a small vehicle is it's small. It can't fit many people on. That limits your revenue. The costs of running a small vehicle, they're not that different to a big vehicle. They're a bit cheaper to buy, the fuel's a bit better, but you're still paying your driver the same, and the driver's the biggest cost. Our big challenge with the industry is our biggest flows are at school times. We have double-deck vehicles for 1-2 journeys a day, and then off-peak, they've probably got 10 people, 12 people, 15 people on, and you almost want like an accordion bus that you could shrink down. But it's not cost-effective to have a school fleet and a non-school fleet, because the costs just don't add up, so you end up running big vehicles. I think the opportunity is probably to look at what we can do to sort of widen out those school peaks. I mean, how nice would it be if a third of the schools started at 8 o'clock, a third 9, and a third 10 o'clock? That fleet could be a lot more reduced. It would reduce congestion, and then you can have a more all-day service and not one affected so much by the schools.
The term demand responsive transport refers to the use of small buses, minibuses, to pick up what might be described as almost taxi-like flows. In a big urban area like this, it's unlikely that there would be an area that would respond well to that, although it does have an application where the roads are narrow. And it may be that something similar might be the answer for the Rochester question that was mentioned earlier. I'm very flexible about the size of vehicle that we use, provided the income works out for us, provided it pays its way. I'll buy small or large or medium-sized buses to fit the characteristics of the passengers.
Just to come back on that, yes, it's almost finding something that's, you know, between a regular bus and an Uber, so people can get bags on at the same time, but you get at least 12 or 16 people on there. But as my fellow councillor said, sometimes you see buses with only 3 people on it on the whole journey, and that just doesn't seem cost effective either. Thank you.
So we did a trial in Sittingbourne of something very similar, called it a Riva Click. And yeah, it was basically like an on-demand service. You booked it on an app, and the technology behind it grouped journeys together. Ultimately, it wasn't commercially viable. The costs of running it weren't covered by the revenue because you couldn't get sufficient demand to get enough people on the bus. The more people you put on the bus, the longer you made the journeys because they all went different ways, and then it became less attractive. And I think there was the price point. The price people are willing to pay for that sort of service is not the price that covers the cost. People see it more as a £3 bus fare rather than a £20 taxi.
Thank you. Councillor Peake, please.
Yeah, thank you for this conversation. It's been actually, the latter part's been very interesting. And before I get to my question, can I just say to you, Mr. Jennings, I'm really pleased about your response about franchising, because I full-heartedly support the idea of you don't start off by following a dogma. You actually identify very clearly what the challenge is, and then look at the best solution, and then look at the way to deliver it. Oh, how I wish there could always be choices, because I fully agree with that sentiment. Sorry for repeating myself, but an example, this time last year when I had my first eye stroke, I have another one now, that's why I'm squinting all the time. An example of me visiting a client, I visit clients who work in mental health, a 15 car journey, doing that by bus, 2 buses, an hour and 15 minutes. So when I had the choice, when I could drive again, guess which option I went for. Now I'll get to my question. Several of us here sit on planning, and I think it's fair to say there is actually on the whole a cross-party consensus of concern that whenever we get potentially large planning applications, the concern, and there is a desire to actually have at the planning stage the possibility of a viable bus service to give a choice. So my question to you is, when those discussions take place, because I know our officers, they are very communicative, they are excellent. I've got to say that, Dave, not just because Dave's here, the planning officers, they have very strong communication links with the applicants and everybody else involved. Would you say that both your organisations are actually quite communicative, that you are responsive and you're positive about trying to work for a solution?
I think part of the problem is that developers are not keen to make contributions. And it's to Medway's credit that they do secure contributions from developers. Looking at North Dane Way, however, one maybe would think that that would be better if it were part of a bigger master plan. But the development's already there. You can't really shoehorn a small development in with a huge transport infrastructure built into it. It's easier on a brown or a greenfield site, but I'm feeling that developers don't really want to develop urban sites as much as they want to have a site where they can attract perhaps a different type of buyer who wants to have a house in its own grounds and so on, rather than being flats or whatever. So I think we have to follow what the developers want to do. And in my view, developers don't want to spend money on bus services.
I think sometimes people underestimate the cost of putting a bus on the road. So to put one vehicle on the road for a year, it's about £250,000. For a new development to support that, it needs to be there multiple years. I think one of the challenges with development is when you see a large development, you think 500, 1,000 homes. To support a bus service long term on its own, you need bigger than that. The clever bit has to be of joining the developments together so that one bus can serve multiple developments and tying it onto existing routes. Don't put a route that connects a new development to the town and that's it. Stick that on the end of an existing route because it'll give you a more frequent service and it'll give you a more attractive service that's more likely to get people out of their cars. The key for people moving into a new house and using a bus is frequency. They're not going to build their lives around an hourly, 2-hourly bus service. They want one where they can just walk out the door, wait at the bus stop, get on it and go, not even look at a timetable. And I think the Two is a good example in that there's so many little pockets of development happening there. If you tied all that together into a big master plan, you could really do something special there. But it's about how that works through the planning system, how that works in terms of getting the infrastructure in and designing it.
Thank you for that answer. Wouldn't it be wonderful that we could work together to get to that point? Thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, you vaguely indicated that you might want to pop in again.
Very quickly, I wasn't going to come in again, but Councillor Lawrence energises me. Let me tell him, quick comment, an economic success story, Blue Water Park, which may well be within the new unitary authority area, depending on what happens with the government announcement on local government reform. The buses run into the centre. That was quite a deliberate decision by the county council. I was part of the administration at the time it opened. The buses run into the centre of Blue Water Park next to Marks and Spencer. People who want to drive there can drive. There is car parking, but the priority is the public transport running into the middle, which goes on throughout the time that the centre is open, round the clock. So long as the centre is open, there are bus services, take the staff out in the evening and what have you. So, and of course, Mr. Harris mentioned, the Chief Planning Officer mentioned links to the local rail station. You've got Greenhithe and you've got buses from there. So it's possible to have transport choices. Of course, it's essential to give the buses priority in that sort of situation and in other situations. And I think that's probably a good note on which I should shut up and leave it there, Chair. Thanks.
It would be, this is a very good debate, but you should probably have your mics on. Yes, absolutely. Anyway, I'm very glad this members' item has filled more than adequately filled the time there. So I'm going to go to the Vice Chair for a proposal. Obviously, we note the note on electrification and air quality. Was there anything else that anyone wants to pick up in the recommendations? Okay, I'm going to go over to the Vice Chair for a proposal.
Yeah, so we have that specific recommendation that you just mentioned, Chair, and then the specific recommendation that the committee is asked to note the comments from officers and bus service providers in response to the members' item. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you, committee, for hearing me to go on about buses for an hour and a half. And thank you very much to the operators and officers there. And can I just extend my thanks again to everyone who works in public transport across Medway, the drivers, the mechanics, the administrators and staff, dare I say, the transport planners. So thank you very much for your time. And is that proposal seconded? Is that agreed? Thank you very much. We'll take a short 10-minute break. Thank you all. good to go. Thank you. Thank you all again. The next item is another member's item submitted by myself, but you'll be glad to know it shouldn't be as intensive. But this is around the Southern Water Independent Customer Scrutiny Committee. Tonight, I have invited Mr. Dan MacDonald. Dan! He may be familiar to some of you members here in his role as chair of the Southern Water Independent Customer Scrutiny Committee. So rather than big introduction, I'll just hand over to Dan just for a short introduction and then to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I can promise everybody, this is really scary, this end actually, so not just going to change the way I work, maybe the other side, but I can promise you, members, I won't be mentioning LGR in my next neither tonight. Look, I really welcome this opportunity. Can I just say this is the first Regen committee that I'm going to, and I'm going to all Regen committees from Medway right to the Isle of Wight over the next few months, just to explain the scrutiny process. And I really welcome the opportunity tonight to make Medway the first one I do. So thank you very much, Chair, for submitting that as a member's item. Look, I think it's important to start by acknowledging the obvious, and that's that public trust in the water sector remains extremely fragile. I think we all know that. And I have seen this committee do some great work when you've had Southern Water officers here. Residents have seen pollution incidents, environmental damage, infrastructure failures, regulation intervention, increasing bills, and at times a perception that customer concerns have not always been listened to. And that is the backdrop against which Southern Water and indeed the wider sector now operates. The reason the Independent Customer Scrutiny Committee exists is because customers deserve more than being told that accountability exists. Over the last 10 months to a year, we have sought to create a model that puts challenge, transparency and public accountability front and centre. We are not a customer focus group. We are not a communications exercise for Southern Water, and we are not there to endorse corporate messaging. If we were, I certainly wouldn't be sitting there. Our role is to ask the difficult questions on behalf of customers and communities, and to do so publicly. That means challenging senior executives, it means challenging directors, the board, and it also means, and we have challenged the shareholders and about to do the regulators too. And customers have been remarkably consistent in what they tell us. They do not want spin, they do not want slogans, they do not want carefully crafted corporate messages. They want evidence and they want proof, and they want to know that lessons have been learned. And of course, as you all know, they want to see visible improvements in their communities. So the Scrutiny Committee has therefore consistently pushed Southern Water to move beyond explaining and towards demonstrating, not simply telling customers what is planned, showing them what has changed, and not simply discussing ambition at every meeting, but providing evidence of their delivery. And also not simply talking about trust in them as a water company, but earning that trust is really important. And to Southern Water's credit, I've got to say they have opened their doors to scrutiny in a way that many organisations would find uncomfortable. I insisted that all our meetings are live streamed, our discussions are all in public, and our recommendations are recorded. And of course, there have been robust conversations and there have been difficult conversations, but that is exactly, as you all know around this table, that's exactly how scrutiny should work. And as I look ahead, my view is that communication and reputation must increasingly become rooted in local experience. And so customers do not judge Southern Water based upon PowerPoint presentations. They should judge Southern Water based upon whether the river near their home is cleaner, a pollution incident is dealt with properly, or whether they've received the clear information when something has gone wrong where they live. And also whether they feel they are receiving value for money. That is where the reputation is won or lost. And our Scrutiny Committee will therefore continue to challenge. on a simple principle. Do not tell us what you hope customers think. Show us what customers are actually experiencing and show us what is changing as a result. Thank you, Chair, and I look forward to some nice member questions over the next 5 minutes or less.
I always appreciate scrutiny chairs, scrutinising scrutiny chairs. Thank you for that. I just want to ask just a few basic questions, just for the understanding of this. This scrutiny function, is this a voluntary agreement that Southern Water reached into? I'm assuming, are there any statutory powers? What happens if the Independent Scrutiny Committee is not satisfied in the response of Southern Water, and what course comes from that, I think, would be the basic starter for 10.
Thank you very much, Chair. The committee role is voluntary. They asked me with my other hat I used to sit on their customer board many years ago. And I've publicly said that customer panel was inside a room. We would meet once every few months. We would listen to officers, and then we'd all go home. And that's what it was. They asked me to come back when the new CEO came on board, and I said I would only come back if we did it this way. Live stream, open scrutiny, not in a room just with 10 or 12 people sitting around a table being told something. And I will say, although myself and Lawrence have difficult conversations, he totally opened the door and allowed that to happen. If we don't get the things we asked for, we're not the board. We are a scrutiny panel. But every recommendation is noted and every action is noted, and I have to produce a report every year for that board. But they invite me to the board to present that report, and there are recommendations already that the scrutiny panel has made that are being listened to and are being acted upon now by Southern Water. So it's Accountable Water is a body of volunteers, and they've asked us to go. I will say though, Chair, that the same offer went to South East Water, and we are still waiting for that message back.
I was going to say, it's a small blessing that we are in the Southern Water area as opposed to the South East Water area, I may say, even if we have our own issues. So just two more quick questions. One for people watching tonight on live stream or reading the minutes, etc. How can the general public interact with you as a scrutiny function to make their representations and their issues there? And secondly, what powers and resources of investigation do you have to fulfil the scrutiny functions?
It's a very good question, Chair. I think so. The customers reach out to us. We are obviously on the Southern Water website, and it links into our website and to our body. We also, the volunteers go along to the water functions. They have open days across the region. All of our volunteers happily go to those, and the first one I went to was in Folkestone, and I was at this table and I thought no one's going to come up to this table during this 3-hour event, and we were absolutely inundated. So there is an open and transparent way of coming through to us. I can also assure you that everything that customers tell us at these events, you will hear me mention at the public scrutiny panels that we do. And we make sure that's there. And for example, in our next scrutiny panel, you'll see us call in witnesses. We're going to call in customer witnesses that have experienced an outage or a flood, and they will be coming live onto that scrutiny via camera or via web stream to make sure they tell us their own experiences in public. So it is a total open forum for them to, and all of these water companies, as you would imagine, utility companies, they have lots of customer focus groups and which is great, and they have a lot of agencies and consultants. The idea of this scrutiny committee is to be the customer voice as best we can, and that's what we do. And the regulation stuff, I will say, something the government is going to be helping us with, I would say, or has to, because part of our role, we hold the shareholders up the top to account, and we hold all of the directors, and you know, we're there to do that. But the most important part about this model, we should be holding the Environment Agency to account, and Ofwat to account as well, because when they make fines, for example, when they fine water companies, where's the money being spent? And we are in talks now with the Department of Environment, etc., to make sure that we will have them around the table and ask them the difficult questions too.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence, and then if any, I see a few other members have indicated, but Councillor Lawrence has indicated first.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Dan. I think given your experience in local government and, you know, through Medway CAB, you strike me as the ideal type of person to do this job, a job that I didn't even know existed. I didn't even know the panel existed. It must be one of the best kept secrets in the world that there's this scrutiny panel out there doing all of this great work. But I think that's a bit of a problem. So I just some questions about, you know, public recognition and sessions. Just how many people watch the live streams?
I'll answer as I go along. So we had stats on the last one we done. I think there was about 250, 300 people that watched that. They watch it as it goes because it's live streaming. You've got the team that help us really well. We have an external communications team come in and do the filming and the cameras and that. We want to try and keep it as independent as possible. But yeah, I think that's. But remember, the link is there. So they then send the link out. We do a press release. I do a press release. It's sent out, especially when we're talking about some of the incidents in Southampton and other places. Yeah. It's there.
Okay. All right. I'm just wondering whether the fact that you exist is a recognition that regulation has failed here. Because it's very easy to fine a water company, but that actually doesn't really solve the problem. We know Southern Water haven't paid a dividend for 7 or 8 years. So it's not like we're punishing shareholders, because shareholders are piling in investment, but they're actually not getting anything back. So just to fine them again strikes me as slightly, I'd much rather them be made to do something. And I think when we had them here for scrutiny, it occurred to me that when you read the reports, the big issue was that pricing increases have been held down for a long period of time. Then all of a sudden we had to find, you know, £6 or £7 billion to immediately put right what should have been put right a few years ago. So I'm just wondering, is there a danger of there are too many people trying to hold Southern Water to account that actually they're being pulled in that direction by you guys, they're being pulled in that direction by Ofwat? Then we've got the absolute continued failure of the Environment Agency to do anything properly. You know, with all your good contact in government, what are they actually saying, look, is a good model for regulation? Yeah.
Look, I think, again, excellent questions. We are a pilot. So I set it up and I said to Southern Water, let's give this a try and see where it goes. I mean, I've got, like I said, I've got to give them their due. They are up against it in a lot of places. And they totally allowed us in, which is more than what other companies may do. So I've got to say that. I think, look, the regulators, and that's why we need to have those conversations now with the minister and with people up in government about where is, you know, Ofwat and everything's changing. It's all changing, and it's all going to be changing again, and there's different models coming out there. And you are right, there's lots of different agencies out there holding the water companies to account. What I see the difference with us is, and I see it very similar to what you do, is that the main focus of us going in there, like I say, we're not the board. And you are right, they haven't paid any, and I'm not here to sell Southern Water, but they haven't paid any dividends since 2017. Mm. And the expectation is that dividends will be paid in 2030. Which, you know, is another worry, isn't it? Because the questions we asked then, and we did ask the shareholders, is what happens, will you take all the money and then go, you know? But they have invested a lot of money into Southern Water. But the pilot needs to be viewed by government now about how the customer voice is now going to be handled. Because if I was in that closed room again, and I was just asking questions as an interested customer, what does the customer get out of that as well if it's not live streamed? I mean, look, not everyone's watching tonight. They might be now I'm here, but they're not watching. They're not watching this evening. They're not watching this evening, but actually the message still gets out there. But the aim is, Councillor Lawrence, is by me doing this messaging to all members across the region, is that your voices, customers, everyone, we want the message being passed out there that we exist.
Well, I'll give you a plug in my next blog. Just look at two other questions. Just in the report, you talk about lots of things you've been looking at. What do you think is the single most significant measurable operational change that you've managed to get Southern Water to do that maybe they hadn't actually thought about themselves? And just sort of following that up, really, what's going to happen if you and the panel sit down with Southern Water and say, you really need to do this, and they just go, nah. Thank you, Chair.
Look, we have a terms of reference, and you're right. There is nothing to make them, you know, they could turn around and say, we're not doing that. They can. You know, we can sit there and if you watch some of the links, you'll see we do, well, those of you that know me, you know that I'm going to robustly challenge. But they can refuse to do any of it if they really wanted to, but they are listening and they are taking it on board. They won't do everything. The next meeting is around trust of this of Southern Water and trust from customers and how they operate. That's a big topic for them. We're going to be talking about how they communicate with customers. Is it good enough? Is there enough on social media? Is there, when there's an incident, do you do enough? And you know, many of you know that they don't. But they are listening to everything we're saying is all noted, and they are changing the way that their communication methods are going forward. But if you was to ask me the biggest operational change, you might think it's just a quick get out here. Biggest operational change for that water company is by allowing us in. Because others won't, Councillor Lawrence. I can assure you, if I went to some of the utilities, you know, some of those, they might say, no, it's all right. We've got a few customer panels, we do our little bit and we put it in our report at the end of the year. It's fine. But they've not been scared to allow us in. When I do the end of year report, I'll make sure you get it. I'll send it to you, all of you as members. Hopefully you'll see then what exactly has been taken forward from all of our meetings, because I'm pretty confident that a lot of it will be. And even the shareholders listened quite well to our challenge, and they weren't aggressive at all. So thanks, Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you. Next, I have Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Lawrence. This must be the world's best kept secret. So why? That's the first question. No, seriously, what about the backroom services? I mean, you can't exist on your own. You're going to need some form of clerking. You may well be calling the tune, but who's paying the piper? So that's my first question. And secondly, how much teeth do you really have? Can you require people to attend? Because that's something an ordinary ONS can't do. We can require, you know, I remember when I was chairing the CYP, I wanted to get the regional director in, but no chance. So how much teeth has your committee got?
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I'll start with the last bit. I think when we set up, when we went into Southern Water and I had that meeting with Lawrence, I said it has to be an open door process. There is nobody that we can't request in Southern Water to attend. Everybody will come. If I requested the chief, so in August we hold the chief exec to account, and I can call in directors and of service to all of them.
I said require.
When we look at papers, if members feel, when I do agenda planning and we're looking at the topics over the year, the different topics, you know, whether it's water pollution, etc., if we want people to come, we can ask those people to attend. And we've never been told no once. So I think that's a real, and you know, we may not even get that in some of the other sectors that we deal with our other hats on. Can I just say about the best kept secret? I don't think it's a secret. I think many of you know that I do quite a lot of stuff anyway. but it's a pilot. You know, I'm quite a modest person, really.
No.
It is a pilot. It is a pilot, and the committee is made up of different volunteers, and they're all really good in there. We've got a GP, and we've got an ex-banker, and we've got a lot of, like, just different experience, and they are customers from the region. So Hastings, Brighton, Worthing. We've got two new members now coming from Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. So. I needed to be careful, but also let me just say, and I'm going to be very upfront about this, the staff response from Southern Water has been amazing to what we do. They watch it afterwards. I've had some great responses from them. But I'm going to be honest, I say it in every meeting. It's not something that people are scared. Staff in Southern Water are very scared to say they work for Southern Water sometimes. And that's why myself, I don't mind saying it, it's redacted here. It's redacted because my name and address is still on the website. You never know what people may do. So it's not a kept secret now because I'm here, and I'm so glad I've come here. But there wasn't no weird reason why I kept it secret. I just needed to be careful and make sure it was a success.
But all this must come with a cost.
So
who at the end of the day is it for Medway Council taxpayers?
No,
Council full stop.
Yeah, so Southern Water provide the room in their headquarters. They provide the clerking. They provide we don't. We're volunteers. They pay for the ones that come and do the camera screening and everything else. The volunteers get expenses to travel to Worthing, which you'd expect because they come from all over different places. That's fine. But that is all at the moment that we do need at a committee.
I was a bit concerned it might be our democratic services because they work their socks off anyway.
No, it's nothing to.
No,
can I just honestly say, I don't think many officers in Medway Council knew I'd done it either. So I certainly, those of you that know me around this table know that I wouldn't be using Medway resources to do anything with this. Yeah. This is a voluntary external thing. Thank you. Councillor.
Okay, Councillor Peake.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm really glad to see you're in this position. I care a lot less about whether a company is privately run or publicly run. What I actually really care about is genuine accountability. I'll come back to this. I was also interested to hear what you said about they are concerned. So bear with me on this. I went to hear or watch Al Murray at the Central perform. And in the front is Chris Boulding. He says he's a councillor. He got jeered. Somebody else, because he was asking people, what do you do for a job? Somebody said, I work for double glazing, got jeered. Car salesman got jeered. Do you know the person who got by far the biggest sneering jeer of everybody was the person that they said he worked for Southern Water. And Al Murray really went for him. So they've got one heck of a really, really low-level reputation. And this does matter because bear in mind that I'm naturally a positive, I'm optimistic. I'm much more interested about can do rather than moaning. When those two officers that Councillor Lawrence referenced to that came to Regeneration, I heard them say several times, write to us and we will answer your questions. So I had a case going on where somebody that I was given support with, his bill had been gone up by 6-fold with no explanation whatsoever. After about 9 months of writing, over 20 phone calls. So I wrote to those two people. I can't say they didn't answer me, but their idea of answering me was to pass it down to somebody else, who then passed it down to somebody else, passed it down, and ended up with the same customer services support team I started talking to 9 months ago, and it was obvious that that person hadn't even bothered to read the email trail. What a waste of time. That is not accountability, and that is what really makes me angry. If you're genuinely here for people to help them and support them, then whoever they are need to be accountable. So this leads to my question, because you said they're going to do a thing on trust. So are you optimistic about the idea that they will actually generally make themselves accountable? Thank you.
I think, can I just start by saying you're exactly right about the staff, and I've got to say, and I will say it here, they have amazing staff teams there. I know everyone gets really angry when something goes wrong, but the staff that I've met in Southern Water, the ones that are out on the roads, the ones that are doing the work, are amazing. And I think, none of them should ever be threatened none of us should be threatened in any of our roles that we do. It's just not good enough. It is a major agenda item, Councillor Peake. So, you know, we've got it on there is trust and credibility. And it's we've got the head of their press there. We've got their directors there. And the biggest thing that people tell me, the customers, when they come to any roadshow, say, oh, I don't trust them. They're all taking loads of dividends. They're all taking loads of money. It's the messaging that needs to go out that might change people's view on what actually does happen. Now, look, like I say, I'm not here to defend some of the failures of Southern Water. That isn't my role as Scrutiny Chair. I am here to actually tell customers the reality that when you open your tap and that liquid gold comes out, and then you go and wash your car with it, and then you go and throw it in your garden, or we actually flush our loos with it. Part of being the chair and part of all of our committee, we had a lot of immersion into all of the teams and what Southern Water does from top to bottom. And you actually realise how lucky we are to have that water and have it on tap and have it available. And, you know, but no company escapes accountability. And we're under our scrutiny, nor will Southern Water. But they're not running out the door. They're opening the door and sitting there in front of us waiting for us to ask the questions. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Peake.
Thank you. The last person I have down to speak on this is Councillor Brake.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Dan MacDonald, the man of, I don't know, many talents. And this is another one that you're demonstrating this evening. But
you mean in addition to modesty?
Oh, yeah, well, that was at the back of my mind. But thank you, Councillor MacDonald. But one thing I would be interested to know is that how does this all start? It's, you know, we all understand scrutiny because we're all part of the system, and many of us for many years. But to scrutinise, the information must come from somewhere initially. Southern Water is probably the target of many complaints. I would suggest, like most water companies and most utility suppliers, they're not very well blessed with complimentary comments coming into their offices. So there's lots of complaints, if I could put them into that block, that go into Southern Water. Are they all maintained by Southern Water, and are you scrutinising the complaints that come in so that people can understand what the complaints are about, what Southern Water are doing, what the outcomes are, as well as, of course, any complimentary comments that come in? How does it go together? And if a member of the public didn't feel happy that they were getting the service that they should be getting, having complained to Southern Water, where do they go to next, please?
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. I got it. Good job, I know how to run the mics here. Councillor Brain, that's a really good question. Look, can I just say that the good thing about these companies, and I'm sure Southern Water is not the only one, these huge companies, they are data rich. They have insight, customer insight, that is just amazing. And that customer insight has allowed us. So what we do is when we have the meeting on customer complaints, relations, etc., the amount of insight in our reports is phenomenal. And, you know, if they could send me 300 or 400 pages, they would, but we don't want, none of us want that 300, but they summarise those complaints really effectively. And the compliments, let's not forget they do have a lot of compliments. You know, I think, look, let's be honest, the biggest complaint on their list at the moment is the bills doubling. But I think Councillor Lawrence said earlier that is because they didn't put them up for some time. If you want infrastructure to change and you want infrastructure to improve, there has to be a cost. But I really understand how customers are feeling when their bills are doubled. And without that full communication, without the proper way of telling them how, or telling them where it's going to be spent. But the complaint part is totally transparent. And they have the same as every other public, every other utility company. They can go to the Ombudsman, they can go to different areas, they can complain through that. I didn't want our scrutiny committee to become the complaints department for Southern Water, because I don't think I'd ever leave my house. I think we need to be away from that a little bit. We need to be on top of it and see the themes, but we also need to step away a little bit and look at the whole picture and what can be done to stop that trend the next time round. And, you know, if there is a major outage in certain places, but how will you make sure that's not going to happen again next Christmas or next summer? You know, we need to, that's where I feel we come in, is how to stop those trends. But we will keep you updated. Thank you, Councillor Ray.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp, did you briefly want to come in here? Yes. Will you indicate you want to re-speak? Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So, yeah.
Yeah, just briefly. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about Councillor Peake's resident, but I've got the opposite personal experience. The bill came through and I was absolutely horrified. It had gone up 300%. And the first thing I did was looked at the meter, and the meter was what it says it is. And I looked then at the cost per unit, and that had gone up, but I expected that. So I thought there must. And so when I looked at checked the meter, I saw the little thing going round when there's nothing being used inside the house. I thought, oh dear, I've got a water leak. So I called them. 2 days later, the guy came out, and he dug it all up, and there was a fault with the meter. So he changed the meter. He said there's also another fault. He said you've got a tree root going through into your pipework, which is a Medway Council tree, by the way. So anyway, they came back and they fixed that and they repaired all the work. And I got a new bill, and I was paying. I had to sort of monitor my water usage over 2 or 3 weeks, which is fair enough. On the basis of that, they gave me a revised bill, and it was turned out to be 2/3. In spite of the increase in unit costs, the actual bit I was paying was only 2/3 of what I was paying originally. And I thought, well, that's good. And then all of a sudden, I got a check in my bank account for a quite considerable amount, several £100s. And I thought, you know, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So I rang them up and said no, we've calculated that this leak must have been happening for a number of months, if not years. So they worked out on my average over, he's talking about being data rich, they knew what my bill was over the last 5 years. And they said, well, this is the extra which you've paid as a result of this leak. And so not only am I now paying 2/3 of my original bill, I've got a nice little place for my holiday. So I've got nothing to say against Southern Water. They're the best.
Have you got rid of the tree? That's the main thing. I think. Can I just say thank you for that? And I just want to tell all members. I know. I did watch last time, and I may come along with John Mealy and the team, because I work with the stakeholder team. Can I just say that? When you do go back to them and you do tell them that information is good, they're going to put brand new smart meters across the whole region, which will be watching those leaks and seeing where there's changes. That would be really good. But the one thing I will say, and you will know this, all members here will know this because of my other hat, their vulnerability team is second to none. The way they deal with their residents who are vulnerable is second to none. But the problem is, starting with the very first question, Chair, that was asked by Councillor Lawrence, people don't always know about what is available. And that's what needs to change. But thank you very much, members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think that's an appropriate time to move over to the Vice Chair for our proposal.
Thank you. So I've just noted that Dan kindly said that we'd received the end-of-year reports from the committee. Other than that, the committee's asked to note the comments from Dan MacDonald in his capacity as Chair of Accountable Water Kent in response to the members' item. Thank you.
Is that seconded? Is that approved? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Dan MacDonald. Okay, we're now moving on to the Medway Developer Contributions and Obligations Guide consultation. This will be briefly introduced by Catherine Smith and Dave Harris.
Thank you, Chair. I think members are familiar with our system of developer contributions, which we collect to help address the impacts of growth, and it allows us to increase the provision of services such as schools through contributions gathered through development. We have a supplementary planning document which sets out the range of services we collect against, and it provides the basis that the Council uses to negotiate and secure contributions towards local services. We do report on this, just going back to the point that's been made, I think, in a few items this evening. We now have an annual infrastructure funding statement that's reported to Cabinet every December. That sets out information for the preceding civic year on the funding received, agreements entered into, money spent and money that's held within the authority. It also allows us the opportunity to set out those projects in the future, which we'll be looking to allocate funding towards. In addition to that, we have regular reports to the Planning Committee, which provides the details of the funding that's been collected on recent planning applications. So why are we updating the guide? You'll be aware there's been quite a lot of work on the local plan in recent years, but in advance of the local plan, we consider it is helpful to the authority to provide an updated guide before we get through to the end of the local plan process. As we've been working on the local plan, as you understand, a lot of that work has concerned the adequacy of infrastructure to address the growth needs that will come with the development plan. With that work has been an improved understanding on costs, the needs across the area. So we've got an evidence base that's been recently updated and a greater understanding through the liaison that we're doing with services and bodies like the NHS to understand the more updated costs. So we want to reflect that in what we're asking. So we've updated the guide to reflect some of those higher costs. Many of them are not moved significantly. We've also added some smaller contributions for social care, public realm, public rights of way, and we have reference skills. What we're also seeing is that we now have a number of strategic scale applications coming through Planning Committee, which are in advance of the local plan. They're either local plan site allocations or they're sites that have not been selected for inclusion in the development strategy. Now, our local plan looks across the development needed in Medway, and with that scale of development, what needs to be in place to provide for sustainable growth. If we have a lot of planning applications, particularly these large schemes for over 500 homes, coming forward in advance of the local plan and not meeting the requirements which we've identified would be needed for schools, open spaces, transport investments, we're going to lose out. And the sites that come forward after the local plan are going to have a heck of a lot of catching up to do to put that infrastructure in place. So we want to be able to ensure that we can make use of the information, the evidence which we've been collating recently, and to use that in negotiating and securing contributions from development. Alongside this, we're very mindful of the fact that the government has a cut-off date for supplementary planning documents at the end of this month. As part of the changes in national planning policy, supplementary planning documents are out, so we will have new regulations and new plan making. So we do want to get this in to provide a better opportunity to secure the best outcomes for Medway. But we do anticipate that once we have the local plan in place, infrastructure policy might look a bit different, but we've got planning applications that we're dealing with at the moment, and I know Dave will want to comment on that after I've spoken. Just in terms of consultation, we consulted earlier this spring. We received 25 sets of comments. That's significantly less than what we get on local plan matters. We got 21 the last time we did it, so it's not great, but it does show potentially when you're not consulting on development sites, the audience for comments does significantly reduce. We sent the information out to exactly the same mailing groups that we use for the local plan. What I would say is, although the number of comments was very small, they did reflect different sectors. So we had comments from developers, we had comments from voluntary organisations, a couple of people from the public and community groups. So I'm not saying it's, completely representative, but we did have a spread of comments. The issues raised in the consultation generally then reflected the interest of those representatives, with developers generally making the point for lower contributions and services and members of the public generally making the case for asking for more contributions. So we are now preparing to take the report back to Cabinet at the end of the month. We'll be publishing the full sets of comments that have been received. We'll also summarise those comments and highlight how we're looking to respond to those, and be seeking Cabinet to approve that as an updated guide that we're using in reference to planning applications whilst we continue to work through the local plan examination.
Thanks, Chair. Just adding to what Catherine has said, she's talked very eloquently about the short window of opportunity that we've got at the moment to get this SPD signed off. What I would say is that the existing SPD would give us around about 17k per property on a greenfield site. Now, over the last 6 or more years, what I've been saying to developers where I can on greenfield sites is the 17k doesn't cover the infrastructure impacts or the impact of your development on infrastructure. So I've been negotiating hard to get more than set out in the developer contributions guide. And we've been really pretty successful. If I was to say we've got over £1 million towards Deangate Community Park, we would not have got that if we hadn't negotiated hard, because it's not in the existing contributions guide. We've got over £1 million towards Who Community Centre. We would not have got that because that wasn't in the guide. Similarly, in relation to Deangate Ridge sports area, we've got significant contributions towards that. It wasn't in the guide. So we've been negotiating hard. And developers have been working with us on that, because we've been trying to argue that the 17k, as I said, doesn't cover their infrastructure impacts. At the inquiries that we're going on at the moment, 3 sites, we're negotiating hard on those. We're using the work that Catherine has talked about in terms of the emerging local plan, the infrastructure delivery plan, and the infrastructure needs. And I think we've successfully negotiated somewhere between 33 and 36k per property. So double what is in the existing developer contributions guide. So we desperately need this guide to get adopted at the end of June, because it can't be long before developers, and some already are, trying to say, well, that's not in your guide. So I need this to get those infrastructure needs in. What I would say, members, is if I had £1 for every time someone said, oh, we need some money, what about Section 106? I could have retired years ago. But it's not a golden egg. There are tests, legal tests that apply to it. And it can't solve existing problems. It's to solve problems or issues which come as a direct result of the development. There's also a cap. And I think in Medway, at the moment, that cap is around about 35, 36k per property. So we've been pretty successful at those inquiries recently. There is one developer who's arguing viability with us, and they've got an argument. So there is a ceiling to this. But members, I'm sure you've got questions, but really encourage you to help us get this adopted by Cabinet at the end of June. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Chair, can you just help me with some numbers here? Because I was interested in what you were saying about the cost. So I've got a minimum tariff under the new scheme of 24,935. Is that right? And a maximum tariff of 32,000 per property. Do those numbers sound right? Or have I just made those numbers up? Whilst you're finding that information, just there was the House Building Federation were on the radio the other day, and they were talking about the government's target for house building and where we're actually really at and all the pressures. And what shocked me was that they've said that the cost of policy, taxes, and other red tape has grown to £78,000 a property since 2020. So before they've even stuck a shovel in the ground, they're already facing, you know, that house or that property is costing 78,000. Then we layer our costs on it. So if my numbers are right, we're possibly getting somewhere around 100K that's got to come out of the purchase price of the property in order to cover those types of costs. Then we're now saying we want 30% social in the high value sites and only 10% social in the brownfield. Well, the brownfield is so challenging that actually are they ever going to get built at the moment, unless something like MDC comes along. So I'm wondering whether we're ignoring the economics of house building, that all we're doing is doing this. And I understand why you're doing it, because actually government should be paying for all this, not the poor people buying the house, because a lot of the money that will come out of those sites will be spent in other places in Medway, won't even be spent. And, you know, and I've talked a lot about impact on existing communities and how we're not mitigating the impacts of some building. So my fear, Dave, is that these extra costs on top of the massive increase in commodity costs, cost of employing people, we're just going to wreck house building in the near future. I think I'd be interesting to know how East Hill's getting on in terms of selling plots. I know they've started causing chaos in that part of the world, but is our danger that we're just making it so expensive to build that actually we're not going to get a lot built? And then, you know, people like my children who want to stay in Medway are never going to be able to afford a property because, you know, a one-bedroom flat is getting close to £250,000 in Medway. Two-bedroom house is getting close to 300,000. No one's going to, in Medway, is going to be able to afford those types of monies. And then when you analyse the cost of it, a big chunk of it is bureaucracy and, you know, let's call it a tax or building, because that's what it effectively is. You can't get away from it.
Chair, thank you. And welcome to my world. Councillor Lawrence, you make some really good points, and that's why we've got to get that balance absolutely right, because we must make sure it's viable. The Developer Contributions Guide is absolutely critical to have that in place, because that's what, when developers are looking at land purchase, one of the things they look at is, well, what are our other costs? And they look at our Developer Contributions Guide at the moment and they think, well, 17K per property. And therefore they're bidding for the land based on that. And as you say, other costs that they've got. So we need the updated Developer Contributions Guide so they can have reasonable land negotiation costs. But you're right. I mean, planning, it's really expensive going through planning these days, certainly compared to where I was when I started 40 years ago, where planning was just a red line around a site. Now you've got contamination, you've got to do these surveys, you've got biodiversity net gain, you've got all these other surveys you've got to do just to try and get planning permission, and they're all really, really expensive. But I think that we've got, where we are with this Developer Contributions Guide, we're getting close to getting that balance right. But we need to be careful, because we could, if we go too far, it could have that negative effect that you're talking about. What I would say also is that when I talk to developers at this moment in time, this is the hardest time they've gone through in many a year at the moment. and that's why you're seeing some slowdown in building rates. There are other things like the building safety levy on development which is over 6 stories, which is also slowing things down and costly as well. But long-winded answer to your question, it is about getting that balance right for the reasons that you've said.
Thank you. I think that's a really honest answer, Dave. So thank you for that. I've got just a couple of other very minor questions. Am I right in saying the argument you're putting forward to doing it now rather than waiting until the local plan is because you've got developers wanting to develop now, and therefore you'd like to tax them now than wait until after the local plan? That's one question, and I'm sure that's just a yes. And the other one was hopefully more interesting, on the unsold self-build plots. Do we have a capital budget to actually step in rapidly to buy those ourselves if we see an opportunity? Thank you, Chair.
2 cracking questions. Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. I think the first one, I smiled because you made it sound as if I'm taxing developers, and I'm not. What I'm trying to do is to get them to pay for the infrastructure that's needed for their development, as Catherine has said. And yes, the reason I'm trying to bring it forward now rather than waiting for the local plan is those applications are flooding in, and I need to deal with the infrastructure demands from them. So you're absolutely right. In relation to self-build plots, that's a really good question. We've got a number of people coming forward to build self-builders. Some going up, a number going up at High House at the moment. Some going up in Rainham. I think they're not taking off as much in Medway as much as I would like to see them. I think rather than Medway stepping in on self-build, there is an affordable scheme put forward actually by one of our local SMEs. Esquire have got this affordable version of how to bring forward self-build. So I think I need to talk to the SME forum about how they can step in and help on the self-build. But you're right, there are some other councils who have, utilising council land, have come up with self-built developments, and we've seen them on Grand Designs and other such programmes. Yeah,
I think self-build gives us an option to see a mix of styles of housing, because the danger is a lot of these big sites, they're off catalogue effectively in a lot of cases. I know you guys are actually very concerned about design, but let's be honest, they could be wheeled in on a lorry and dumped on the site. But self-build does give an opportunity. And also, it's probably a cheaper way for people to get started in housing if they want to go down that route.
Thank you. I have just Councillor Brake and Councillor Jones who've indicated. So Councillor Brake, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you both for an interesting report full of information, and thank you for that. Given that we've got a lot of development going on at this present time, and we know there's more to come right across the whole of the borough, I'm interested to know what impact on what local councillors can do to make sure that that any discussion relative to Section 106 funding can in fact be directed to assist and improve on the local area that they represent. And I'm saying this on a background of several years ago. Perhaps I was could be described as quite a naive councillor, and I don't think I'd ever let this happen to me again. But there was a development in my ward that did attract some Section 106 funding, and I came up with a list of areas that I felt that that money should be contributed to, which would directly impact and support the local community. Only to find that when the development had been completed, when I inquired as to, well, where's this Section 106 money? I can't see it on any list anywhere. Only to be told that this money had been used to help fund a school in the completely opposite direction to my ward. And when I came back and said, well, I don't think that's particularly fair, given that you had a list of and in this case, I took it up with the legal department as to the fact that this Section 106 had not been used to support my ward. Why had it gone in another direction? I was told, well, it does appear that education has taken priority on your local area. But it wasn't even education in my area. It was education in a totally different area to the one that I represented, which meant the Section 106 money was taken but not used for my ward of my area. What can local councillors do to ensure that Section 106 money is in fact used for the purpose that we believe that it should be used for? Thank you.
Chair, thank you very much. And clearly, Councillor Brake, I can't comment on that individual one because I don't know the case that you're talking about. What I would say, if it gives you some reassurance, is that to fulfil the SIL tests, the contribution must be directly related to the development and must be there to make it an unacceptable development acceptable. It should be used to offset the pressure from that development. Now, there will be some contributions which go wider. Education for secondary schools, I use the word secondary schools, is one because kids in one part of the area could go to secondary schools anywhere in the borough. Primary schools should be more local. They should be within walking distance of the site. So for most parts, primary school contributions will go towards that catchment area. The only reason why they shouldn't do, and this has happened not in your area, but has happened recently in Wainscott and Cliff, where money was spent, and I can't remember whether it was spent in Cliff caused by development in Strood, or whether it's spent in Wainscott as a result of development in Cliff. But what it was is that children were going from one area to another area to that school. So what it was used for was to, although the development was here, it was used to do improvements to this school to stop the kids going from this area to that school. So it was still related to that development. What I would say also is the officers I've got working for me now, Jill King and Rachel Flintoft, hold departments to account on it. We negotiate the Section 106s with developers. Developers want to see them related to the development, see that contribution. They want us to be their prospective residents benefiting. So part of my Jill and Rachel's job is not only to get the money in, but to make sure it's spent on what it should be spent on and challenge the various departments. And linked to that, I now have quarterly governance meetings with all services to make sure, one, it's been spent on what it should be spent on, but secondly, it's spent on in good time, because I'm not paying any money back. So hopefully that helps to reassure you in terms of the future, Councillor Brake.
So I think in short, if we direct all of our inquiries direct to you and Catherine, that would be the right approach. Correct?
Chair, what I would, if you're picking up applications on the weekly list, where you should direct those is to the case officer for those applications. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jones, please.
Yeah, agree. This is absolutely essential, necessary, particularly for the infrastructure that we need for the development which is going to come about. And I'm off and on about the need for those empowered, those in receipt of the Section 106 money, empowered to build the infrastructure to get on with it, such as the National Health Service and services where perhaps the speed hasn't been as great in the past as it should have been. I wanted to come at it from another angle tonight, and that is in terms of what level of prescription there needs to be in the 106 to provide the necessary service. Let me take, for example, youth services, because it's a good example to use in this context. If it's agreed to give a donation towards the youth service, and then there's a natural delay in development, and in a few years' time, when the first houses are built, it turns out that the money that was intended for a particular provision, whether it be a youth club or whatever service it was that was intended to be provided, is now out of date. Perhaps the young people have moved on from the street corners they were on, and some other form of provision might be more appropriate. What flexibility is there in the system to ensure that there's still a donation to that service which is relevant to the local area? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's one of the things that we do through those governance meetings, because you're absolutely right, Councillor Jones, that does happen, not just in youth services, but in other services as well, where when the application is considered, they genuinely think that the money should go towards a certain facility or piece of infrastructure. But then when the money comes forward, circumstances have changed. They still want to use it for youth services, or what it should be for, but for a slightly different piece of infrastructure or part of that service. In those circumstances, we'll look at their legal agreement. If it is fundamentally still the same, then we'll spend the money accordingly. If it is a more fundamental change, what we will do is have an exchange of letters or emails with the developer saying, this is a situation at the time of the planning application, this is a situation now. It's still to the benefit of the residents of that development, or offsetting the impact of that development. Are you happy for us to spend it on that? Providing we can justify that it fulfills the SIL test, as Councillor Brake says, relates to that development. The developers have, up until now, always agreed for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there any other members who want to speak on this item? Okay, I will pass over to the Vice Chair for a proposal.
Thank you. The committee is asked to note the content in the updated guide published for consultation and provide any comments in advance of the report to Cabinet.
Is that seconded? Thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Okay. The next item is the introduction of mobile homes fee policy. This will be introduced by Jill James.
Hi, and apologies from Bex. She would have been here today, but is on emergency leave, so you get me explaining it all. So this is about the implementation of a mobile home fee policy, which enables us as the council to recover costs that are associated in delivering statutory licensing and regulatory functions of mobile home parks. So just to lightly go over it, because you'll have seen it all in the paper, there's a range of statutory duties under the Mobile Home Act 2013, and that includes licensing and regulating mobile home parks, carrying out inspections and enforcement of licensing conditions, investigating complaints and taking appropriate action, maintaining publicly accessible registers of site rules and fit for property persons responsible for site management. So in Medway, we have 5 licensed mobile home parks, and this is 612 resident units. The fee enables us to, it came out of our internal audit of the mobile home licensing, and it was highlighting that we have a need to strengthen our governance, transparency and financial sustainability within the service. So without the fee charging policy in place, we wouldn't be able to recover all of the costs that are associated in doing this work, and therefore those statutory duties would fall to the general fund.
Thank you. Just a quick question before I pass over to any members. One area I was thinking about in terms of this policy, so this is specific mobile home parks. What about areas that are more holiday parks, but they might have people living there permanently or own a mobile phone home? Is there any duties that we have in terms of licensing there or consideration on that?
I don't believe so, but that is something I will definitely go away and check, because I don't want to misspeak. So apologies, I don't know that.
That's fine. Any member? Quick one, Andrew, Councillor Lawrence.
Yeah, thank you. Just let me just get my question. Yeah, I'm just wondering, in terms of the penalty licence, is there very strict criteria at which point a penalty licence will be charged? This is going to be terribly technical, Jill. I'm really sorry. Yes, all I'm worried about is there's not discretion being used. There is a set of, right, this fails to meet this criteria.
Again, I will have to check because I really don't want to give you misinformation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, okay. The only other question was, do we have the staff in place to enforce this?
The staffing as a whole, we're looking at because there's whole new licensing. So my understanding is that this will be wrapped up in part of all of our new licensing that's coming on board. But again, I will qualify that in detail for you.
Yeah. I think the only other thing, well, one more question, one comment is, a lot of these mobile homes are very badly insulated. And I'm just wondering whether the annual inspections will include some commentary on insulation, because obviously fuel poverty is a real issue. And, you know, if there's anything we can do in that particular area when we're doing these visits, I think it'll be really, really, really useful. And I think we have to realise that if we start licensing the owners, those licence fees will be passed on in rent. And I'm just wondering if that's actually being thought about, given these homes may contain some quite vulnerable tenants. Thank you, Chair.
Again, I'm not going to have all the answers that you want, and I really don't want to misspeak. So we will take it all away and I will compile all of the relevant answers and come back to you. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp, then Councillor Gilbourne.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. Is the homes occupied by the travelling community counted as mobile?
That is a great question. Yeah, again, we have a whole paper coming around Gypsy and Traveller in the upcoming weeks. So I don't know. I honestly don't know. So apologies. We will add that to the list.
Case of watch this space.
I'm sure we can review the Mobile Homes Act 2013, where there will be clear legal language in terms of that, but I'm sure that could be added to the recommendation. Councillor Gilbourne.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kemp. I had half my question really, but it was more about money. Because I think probably the answer is no, it's not. They're not included within those stats that you've got. But I was interested whether the fees effectively going into this policy for these mobile units, I think, would be the same for travellers and their mobile units when they either have permanent pitches or temporary pitches.
So one of my colleagues who is obviously watching us online, helpfully, is sending me information. Love it when technology works. So they are saying that Gypsy and Traveller is exempt from the licensing fee. But again, what we will do is qualify all of it and come back to you, because I really don't want to give you misinformation.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you.
I'm sure there will. The recommendation may be a briefing note to cover the items discussed tonight.
Yes, that's absolutely.
Excellent. Any other members before I pass over to the Vice Chair for a proposal? No other members.
I have a recommendation for an additional briefing note. Thank you. The committee is asked to note and submit any comments on the mobile homes fee policy to the Cabinet in addition to that. Thank you.
Is that seconded? Is that agreed? Excellent. Okay, we're on to the final straight here. So we are on to the One Council Plan Performance Monitoring Reports and Strategic Risk Summary for Q4 2025 to 2026. Does any members want to speak on that? I do want to just note that there's been a change in some of the key risk profiles, and that is worth noting, a reduction of the risk in terms of the overall government funding, but interestingly, increase of risk in terms of retention and recruitment of staff. That might get discussed a bit more business support committee next week, but if no other member wants to speak on that, I will pass over to the Vice Chair for a proposal.
Yeah, thank you. The committee is asked to consider the Q4 25-26 progress, the performance indicators used to monitor progress of the Council's priorities, the set out in Appendix 1 to the report, and the committee is asked to note the strategic risk summary as set out in Appendix 2 to the report. Thank you, Chair.
Is that seconded? Is that agreed? Thank you. Now it's the petitions report. Obviously, this report, as per usual, is for noting only. Any member want to comment on any of the petitions? Okay, thank you for that. I will go straight to the Vice Chair for a proposal, please.
Thank you. Committee is requested to note the petition response and appropriate officer actions in paragraph 4.1 of the report.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Is that agreed? And on to the final straight, the work programme, and Nicola, who's been patiently and diligently minuting this meeting, will introduce this item.
I think the report can be taken as read as there were no changes to the work programme, but happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Okay, over to the Vice Chair for a proposal.
Committee is asked to note the report and changes set out in section 4.2 of this report and agree the work programme is set out at Appendix A to the report, and the committee is asked to note the action log is set out at Appendix B to the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Is that agreed? And I think we've still got 2 minutes of Mexico-South Africa left. So thank you all, committee, and good evening and see you next time.